So, yes, you were laughing just now when you saw that slide coming up.
I asked if they can see and hear us, and they say no. And I don't know why then.
So
but it says live.
this is such crazy.
Is anybody able to see us?
They're telling me no.
Is anybody able to hear us?
I don't know why. YouTube is not receiving enough video to maintain smooth streaming.
All right, let's downgrade the connection. We're going to have to start on another channel again.
We just say no. Not again.
Well, come on. We know this is going to happen.
Be careful now.
Wait. Isn't there something that we can do?
Yes.
Why is it live? And they can't see or hear you.
Because this is what happens.
Isn't there something else we might need to push?
We have to start over. We have to end the stream. This is exactly what happened before.
Wait. Yes, all good now. Wait. Hold on. Wait. Oh, okay. It's just a lag. Oh, yes. Yes.
Well, we were about to kill it, folks, but now you're saying you can hear me. So once again, sorry about this. We'll trim this part off. Can you hear me? Can you see me and can you hear me? Let's start with that. Please write comments.
So fast.
Are people saying they can see me or hear me?
Yes.
Okay. All right, let's focus on camera angles now and not the chat. Thank you. Okay, let's do this. This is a lot of information, folks. It's a very heavy talk that we're going to be giving you. And these technical problems only underscore the seriousness of what it is that we're going to be talking about today. This is a big deal. This is very important. And so for that reason, back to the slide. We're going to kind of tongue-in-cheek say there is nothing at all interesting going on right now. Everything's just chill, you know? And we now know who the biggest winner in American history has ever been. It is none other than the man who was declared the winner. He got the most votes in American history. This is what they showed after the election on the front page of Drudge Report. The biggest winner in American history, Danny. How do you feel about that?
It's impossible. It's impossible to even imagine that. You cannot hide in your basement unless you know something that no one else knows.
Nobody was there at any of his talks. They had like 5 people show up, 10 people show up.
But it's the history of politics. When you look at the history of American politics, it's not possible.
Right.
Or else all of the history of America is skewed and wrong because every politician looks at Florida. And Florida gives you the demographics of what's going to roll across the country. Mm-hmm. It's the Electoral College is important, but Florida is the most important. When you saw Florida, then you knew what was going to happen, and it didn't.
Yeah. And there was also a surprising, on the Dem side, surprising losses, which normally the party of the winner is usually going to win well in the Senate and in governorships, and that did not happen.
Especially in a presidential election.
Right. So, folks, let's go over to this one. Yeah, this is a very, very strange situation that we're in here, to say the least. And we are also fighting against unprecedented censorship to such an extreme that I wouldn't be doing this right now if I wasn't prepared for this to be the last one. And so that means I'm bringing home the good stuff. So first of all, let's get into the slide again. And I want to take a look at this picture of him, actually, because when you zoom in a little bit, okay, yeah, he's smiling. He's got his fist out. He's got his courtesy mask down there, you know, courtesy to others. But then when you look in closer, look at his eyes, folks. And then let's zoom in even more on that. There's something really
hollow,
really creepy and disturbing about this photograph. And that's the one where he's supposed to be the biggest winner of all time. So on the internet, anyone can say whatever they want, right? And so this is the kind of notice that we might like to see more of on Twitter. We're not going to say that out loud, Dannion, but we'll just kind of keep that in our back pocket. Now, I want to launch right in because we actually have 200 slides. We will get through them. I'm going to try to do this in 2 hours. That's 8 o'clock our time. So we'll make it. But anyway, first of all, I want to get started by talking about Peter David Beater, who is the original insider. And I wouldn't say he's the original insider, but I would say that, and it is an unfortunate name, wouldn't you say, Dannion, if your name is Peter Beater? Okay, let's just try to think about the ramifications.
I would have added the David in there also.
Slides, yeah, you got to. So anyway, it's a really funny thing, and the website is still there. It's peterdavidbeater.com. And this is from the front page. Now, you can read all of his credentials. Suffice it to say, he did work in a variety of government positions, as it says here, and he also ran for governor. We're going to get a lot more into that later. And he became an insider, and he began blowing the whistle. And so this started in 1975. And this is when the first of these audio letters that you can still see on his website today actually started to be published. And so now, because he was releasing them to people on cassette as a subscription, you can go and listen to them on MP3, as you see here. You can also read them in HTML or text format. So we're going to go with the very first one, the very first audio letter that he made was
1975.
on June 21st, 1975.
Got it.
So let's read some of this, because this is very important, folks. In the late 1950s, Nelson Rockefeller decided that the time had come at last to run for elective office. His decision essentially coincided with the adoption in New York State of mechanical V machines made by the Automatic V Machine Company of Jamestown, New York. This company had been purchased and merged into the Rockefeller-dominated Rockwell Manufacturing Company. So this is a V company now. You remember what V is. Rumors were widespread that these machines were fixable and facilitated the stealing of ease. But these suggestions were ridiculed by some who proclaimed themselves to be authorities. So let's just back up again real quick and remember where we started here. Okay? Just so there's no confusion. What we're saying is Nelson Rockefeller decided to run for office, and his decision, this will ever come up, his decision coincided with the adoption in New York State of mechanical V machines. Okay, so this is very important. As soon as New York State actually picked up the mechanical V machines, as soon as they started using them, this is when he decided to run for office in the late 1950s. Okay, and you see where this is going to go. You can already see where this is going.
No question.
This company had been purchased and merged into Rockefeller-dominated Rockwell Manufacturing Company. Rumors were widespread that these machines were fixable and facilitated the stealing of ease. But these suggestions were ridiculed by some who proclaimed themselves to be authorities. In any case, Nelson Rockefeller, New Deal Democrat, resolved to enter the race for the governor of New York State as a Republican, since the Democrats were committed to nominating someone else, Averell Harriman.
All intelligence.
He was welcomed into the Republican Party without any difficulty and easily became the nominee. So here he is right here, folks. This is Nelson Rockefeller. He is a very, very creepy guy, which you can kind of see in this picture. And his weird out-of-date glasses, even for 1975, nonetheless became, in this movie, the Kingsman, the Secret Service. They use, as you can see that, Dannion, the exact same glasses as Nelson Rockefeller in the 1970s, which clearly does not seem to be an accident. Okay, so...
But it would be to set some kind of psychology in play.
Absolutely. No, look.
How you would identify with a certain character.
We could divert to the Kingsman Secret Service story for just a little bit here. And we can say that these two movies are grotesquely DS-oriented, cabal-oriented. So they are basically showing themselves to be, the hitmen for the cabal. And in one of these movies, one of these agents actually goes into a Christian church and just starts hacking everybody apart. And they make it like it's funny, and they have rock and roll music going on. It's crazy.
That's insane.
Yeah, it's crazy. And then the villain, played by Samuel Jackson, is this guy who wants to greatly reduce the Earth's population
with a chip
through
implant.
a chip that's in the cell phones that he gives everybody. He gives everybody a free phone, right? The free services that you don't have to pay for.
Barack did it.
And then embedded in there is this technology that ultimately caused everybody's heads to blow up. Everybody that they want gone. And so it's a very, very
Sounds
revealing.
familiar. Sounds familiar, David.
It certainly does.
I've heard this story before.
All right, so let's go back to
But
the
how
slide.
you would use those glasses to set some type of psychology, if it's politics, is a strategy behind it.
I think they want you eventually to go back to Nelson Rockefeller's pictures and decide that he's a good guy because he reminds you of the movie. That's what I think is going on. I think it's like an homage to Rockefeller because they see these people as gods.
Well,
In
all
this-
the,
in
all the
this
way to the
organization.
highest point of the Rockefeller Foundations,
Yep.
and all of that, all that stuff you hear.
Okay. So after winning the election, back on the slide now, handsomely I may say, Rockefeller promptly took full control. After he won the election, he took full control of the automatic voting machine company by buying up stock from minority stockholders at $20 a share, 5 times greater than the market price of $4 a share. Of course, there was no suggestion that this reflected his evaluation of the role the machines may have played in his election. Okay. Several years later, after he had already bought this company and bought these machines and won the election with them, apparently, is what he's implying, in the early 1960s, a great hue and cry, a big drama, arose in Louisiana about the stealing of ease by means of a different machine in use there, the Shoup voting machine. Finally, the legislature was forced to act. Now, because this is so significant, I wanted to look and see if we could find anything about this now, the Shoup voting machine. So I went to Wikipedia. Sure enough, here it is. And what you can see, Shoup Voting Machine Corporation, blah, 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 blah. Look down where it says contents and look at number 2. What does number 2 say? Criminal cases. And then when you go down to the criminal cases section, this is what we have right here. So let's go ahead and read that text. In July, we're going to read some of it. You can go back and pause it if you want to read the whole thing. In July 1971, United States Attorney General, this is the highest level lawyer in America, okay?
Nixon.
Yep.
Nixon's Attorney General.
That's right. John N. Mitchell announced that the Shoup Voting Machine Corporation of Philadelphia, its subsidiary, Southern Municipal Sales Incorporated, Shoup President Irving Myers, Company Executive Vice President Martin Schott, several other Shoup employees, and other individuals had been, catch our breath, that's a huge sentence, indicted. Here it comes, folks. The Attorney General announced that this voting machine company was indicted by a Philadelphia grand jury for a total of 4 different indictments for bribery, mail fraud, and the ever-elusive conspiracy. And that could be anything, but let's think about it for a minute. You got a V machine company, right? And they're indicted by the U.S. Attorney General for conspiracy. Do you think that might have something to do with rigging something?
Or how would you negotiate with them to use those machines or variation of those machines in other precincts or counties?
Exactly.
There's
We're going to get into
nothing-
that. We're going to get
as
into
you
that.
describe this plot, from a political point of view, I get it really fast, but I'm amazed at what I'm watching.
And it's already on the totally controlled wiki, so the wiki is definitely not your friend. Anyway, here we go. Look at this. According to one indictment, Shoup officials conspired to sell 200 machines. This is off of wiki now, okay? Shoup officials conspired to sell 200 machines to Hillsborough County, Florida, for $530,700 using bribery. Now, what does that mean? That just means that they're going to pay people off in the government of Florida in this area, the Hillsborough County, they pay you off to use government money to overpay for these machines. Okay, so that's what we're going to see. Just so you're clear on this. $530,000, $500,000 is way too much. This is, as you can see in the slide again, $2,653.50 per machine. And then they bought 180 out of the 200 machines back as quote-unquote scrap right after they sold them for a total of only $5,400, which means that Florida was left owning 20 machines for $525,300. And then if you take the per machine cost of what they paid for those 20 machines, that's $26,265 a machine. But at the surplus price, it was only $30.
Yeah.
So that's about as stinky as you can get. It's a clever grift, right?
Like the Afghan war.
How?
Cost plus.
Okay.
If you had cost plus in the war, you would get the generators in. You'd take the spark plug out. You would break it. You put the spark plug back in. You test it, crank it. It wouldn't. You would surplus it, and then you'd order another one. I mean, that's standard cost plus. So
this is just a way to move money around.
A way to bribe people.
Right. Okay. Another indictment, remember there were 4 of these, okay? Another indictment charged that Shoup officials then bribed an official of Harris County, Texas, to buy 100 of them. Well, they'd already knocked them down to free, basically, because they bought them back for $30 a pop.
Yeah.
Now they're going to sell them again in Texas, the same machines, okay? So now you can see, okay, if the actual unit cost that they were selling them for started out as $2,600, that's $265,350 to buy 100 of them. So this is clearly grift, and it's right there again on Wiki, in the middle of Big Tech Central. On March 1st, 1972, the Sarasota Herald Tribune reported that Shoup had changed its plea. This is so important, folks. Please do not tune out right now. Shoup had changed its plea from innocent to no contest. And that means, again, Dannion,
The deal was in.
they know no contest means we're guilty.
Yeah.
Okay?
Paid a
So
fine.
all this stuff they were doing, selling off these voting machines, buying 180 out of 200 back, keeping the money, it's crazy.
They're still doing it today.
Well, that's way ahead of where we're
I
okay.
don't mean to do it, but
Yeah.
it's just imagining how the system works as you're showing
Yes.
it. It's great.
Yes.
Keep rolling.
They were fined a piddly $45,000. That's all they had to pay
And could
when they
still sell
pled
the
guilty.
machines.
And a former salesman changed his plea to guilty and received a sentence of a whopping 181 days. Whatever.
Stealing elections.
Then it goes on. In 1972, and again, this is off of Wiki, C.H. Sammy Downs, a former Louisiana state senator, serving as his state's public works director in the administration of Governor John McKeithen, resigned. So Sammy Downs, a former senator in Louisiana, resigned when he was again indicted by a federal grand jury for bribery in connection with procuring state business for the Shoup Company. This is the same thing we were just reading about. They're doing it again, 1972, a year later. The firm was also indicted in the case. This appears to be C.H. Sammy Downs, the Louisiana senator. As best I can tell, it's the only picture that might be him. I'm not 100% sure. Don't hate me if you find out that I'm wrong, but I'm just trying to give you a facial reference here for Sammy Downs. This is the best I could come up with. It's probably him. In the 1973 trial, the case against Downs, which was pushed by the U.S. Attorney Gerald J. Gallinghouse of New Orleans, again from Louisiana, resulted in a hung jury. And this means no one was found guilty. So here's the U.S. Attorney General Gerald Gallinghouse, who was actually a good patriot pushing for truth. And even with all of this evidence, right, and indictments that had gone through, and convictions resulting in jail time and fines, and people resigning, it's a hung jury.
Sure, because somebody got paid.
And tell everybody out there, as the elder, in case they don't know what a hung jury means.
Hung jury means is all 12 couldn't convict. A person means you have to have everybody decide it. And if it's not, if you have one person that won't vote to convict, that's a hung jury. And usually the judge sends them back or sends them back. But when you're looking at how this machinery is working, David, and what they're doing, there was just one person they needed in that little small town. that would take that
Yep.
to take that cut or that position, and it'd be a hung jury. The same as the $45,000 fine, and you have to have a bill in 181 days, and they're still selling those machines today.
Right, they're still selling them today. They just changed the name of the business. That's kind of the bottom line, folks. You can go home now. You don't need to watch the rest of this.
No, don't miss it. Come on, let's
No,
go.
but we got way more great intel coming up.
Come on.
You probably have never seen this before. You might have seen some of this before, but this is really proprietary. I'm bringing out my A-level material here, folks. Let's put it that way. All right, back to the slide. Seems like there's a lot more to this story because, again, even on Wiki, we hear about 4 indictments, but over here, we hear about 4 indictments, but we're not getting anything really in detail about what those indictments are, other than that they pled no contest to the charges, and there was fines and jail time. But there's 4 indictments, and then one of them is about conspiracy. So the Wiki version has a lot missing. This is the point that I want you to think about. What if an insider like Peter Beater, with the most unfortunate name in the known universe, okay, Peter Beater himself, the illustrious insider, might have more to tell us from having been there, from having researched this, from having studied it. So let's go on and see what he's got to say about this whole Louisiana situation, okay? We're going to return to his audio letter number 1. So this is right where we left off, and I'm actually going to reread you what we had before. Several years later, in the early 1960s, a great hue and cry arose in Louisiana about the stealing of ease by means of a different machine in use there, the Shoup voting machine. Finally, the legislature was forced to act. Well, what did they do? That's what we're going to find out. Now, this is mind-blowing, folks. If you're asleep, wake up, okay, because this is it. On the basis of a concurrent resolution, the legislature in Louisiana staged a demonstration of the various voting machines used in the U.S. Now, notice I highlighted the word various. This means all the different types of voting machines at that time, 1971, 73. One of these 2 cases is where this happened. He said late 1960s, he's a little bit off on that. But he was remembering this from having read about it and studied it, obviously, to at least some depth. He might have got the year wrong, but he's got the basic gist of it. Former employees of the companies in court demonstrated the ease with which these machines could be fixed to steal ease. In court! Isn't it interesting, folks? Isn't it interesting that Louisiana had this happen in court? They demonstrated it in court. Mm-hmm. And the Wiki has nothing to say about that. Oh, well, there were 4 indictments. Conspiracy. But they demonstrated in the courtroom how to do it. It's crazy.
No,
Okay.
it just tells us another whole story that we're not hearing. You're telling another story that's actively happening in America today. And
That's
you're
right.
telling it from a different narrative than the one that everyone's hearing. Everyone should pay attention to this and get in a balanced viewpoint of what's occurring from this program and what David's trying to bring across. Come on.
I agree.
This is great.
Back to the slide now. In the course of the demonstration, because we have a lot of slides, I want to make sure we get them all. In the course of the demonstration, it was shown that the Shoup machine could be more easily fixed and in more ways than any other for the purpose of e-stealing. It's the best one. The court proved it. This is legal proof that the Shoup machine, it's not like the other ones can't do it, it's that this is the best one. And they proved it in court.
So Nelson Rockefeller did make a good investment.
Well, look at what happens next. Very shortly thereafter, New York State, whose governor was now Nelson Rockefeller, ordered the disposal of their existing automatic V machines at sacrifice prices, and their replacement was Shoup machines. Isn't that something? As soon as he found out there was better technology with more ways to do it, more ways to steal and cheat, let's get rid of the old ones, sell them off for nothing, buy the new ones. And then look at this. This is crazy. Control of the Shoup voting machine company was also purchased and passed through a number of obscure transfers which Dun & Bradstreet had difficulty in following and reportedly ended up, when last checked, in an obscure subsidiary of what is now known as Exxon. You cannot make this shit up. You cannot make this up.
How do we fall?
How did we go so far off track?
How do we fall so far, David? How do we have let ourselves fall so far by what is automation, and automation controlling so much of our decision-making process that's in the hands of this kind of pattern?
Exactly aware of what was the main name of the business that the Rockefellers started in the late 1800s. What was it called?
Standard Oil.
Standard Oil. He shoots and he scores. Woo! Yeah.
I got it. Standard Oil.
Oh, this is crazy. It's crazy
It
because
shows
it's
that
his
the-
company. Exxon's his company. That's the whole point. It's his company through a subsidiary.
But it puts those tentacles, when you start to really try to piece all this together, what's happening is the tentacles and how they move in the stories that you hear that you could never piece together, the Bilderbergers and the Trilaterals. All of a sudden, I'm watching before my very eyes in voter fraud, the system that is controlling it, and it comes back to reinforce a lot of those conspiratorial thoughts.
And it was absolutely proven in court. This is true. They showed how to do it
This
in
is
court.
the best one to see. Keep going. Come on.
Oh, we're just getting started, my friend. We're just getting started.
Oh, thanks for letting me be here.
The Rockefeller control of Exxon is, of course, well known. Thereafter, Nelson Rockefeller had no difficulty in being reelected time and again, despite his growing unpopularity in New York State, including wanting to order a military invasion of Woodstock, which thankfully got called off at the last minute. He actually spent 14 years as the governor of New York from 1959 to 1973. And again, right out of Wiki here, you can read it right there. It's about 49th governor of New York from 1959 to 1973. And as you can read here, in case you didn't remember this, he also was the 41st Vice President of the United States under Gerald Ford from 1974 to 77. And you think maybe, just maybe, they were maneuvering him,
100%.
hoping, wishing, praying that he would become President of the United States.
100%. That's what they were doing.
Absolutely.
100%.
Absolutely.
And look how they maneuvered it from the vice presidency. And it's just amazing.
It could be so easily done. And look at that. He's shooting right for the top. He's got the technology. He's got the machines. He knows how to use them. Let's go for the gold. Let's go for the President of the United States. That's what he was shooting for. All right. Now, back to the slide again. We're going to pick up from another article that is linked on Peter Beater's website.
Okay, this is the source.
Dr. John Coleman, and this is just something about the Committee of 300, one of many names. This was written in 1992. Here's the link where you can find this. So this was obviously seen by either Peter or his heirs and successors as a very, very critical document that backs up everything he says. So basically, Peter agrees with all of this. And actually, it looks like this was still Coleman that wrote this. As I said in 1981, we are set up politically, socially, and economically so that we remain locked into the Club of Rome's plans. That's the top of it, the way he calls it. Okay, there you go. Everything, including V, of course, is rigged against us. And this is something he's asserting as a fact. And we see that it was proven in court. If we are to survive, then we must break the stranglehold the Committee of 300 has on our government. In every election since Calvin Coolidge ran for the White House, the Committee of 300 has been able to plant its agents in key positions in government so that it does not matter who gets the White House post. For example, every one of the candidates who ran for the presidency from the time of Franklin Delano Roosevelt were selected, or some like to call it hand-picked. Picked by machines. By the Council on Foreign Relations, acting on the instructions of the RIIA, and this is the Royal Institute of I forget what it is, but it's Royal something or other. It's not the Recording Institute of America. Especially in the 1980 election, every candidate for the highest office in the United States was run by the CFR.
Hillary made a big statement when she was in Chicago to them, like, it's good to be back home where everything works from. It was a quote she had.
Therefore, it was of no consequence to the conspirators who won the presidential race, because the candidates were always controlled. Through such Trojan horses as the Heritage Foundation, the CFR, all key policy-making positions in the new administrations were filled by the Council on Foreign Relations nominees, and before that, since the 1960s, by the NATO's Club of Rome yes men. This is again going back to the Vatican, folks. That's what he's saying. Thereby ensuring that key policy decisions bore the indelible stamp of the Club of Rome and the CFR, acting as the executive arms of the Committee of 300. Both the 1984 and 1988 elections followed this long-established pattern. And we're going to see more on this. The only way we can fight back is by exposing the conspirators and their multiplicity of front organizations. We need men and women with experience who can formulate strategy to defend our priceless heritage, which once lost will never again reappear. Well, thankfully, that's the alliance, and that is exactly what's happening now.
And this is like 1961?
1992 is when this was written.
This is the point of observation based on where he was watching the transition from Reagan into Bush,
right,
and into Clinton, and seeing how that had to be handpicked, and looking at what America would have to do to preserve
Absolutely.
itself. So it's a long laid out plan.
So back to the slide again. We need to learn the methods the conspirators use, learn them, and adopt countermeasures. Well, that's what we're doing right now. Only a crash program will stop the rot which is consuming our nation. So we are going to learn the methods they use, and we're discussing them now. So let's go on now to audio letter number 60. And notice the date, Dannion. November 30th, 1980. Now, you were around during that time, so was I.
Mm-hmm.
This is after the election between Carter and Reagan. Now, we're going to hear some things about the great election surprise, so let's dive into this.
It'll go back to oil, too.
It probably will. So topic number 1. So this is number 60, audio letter number 60. And remember that when he first did his audio letters, the very first audio letter was about the elections. So topic number 1, the great election surprise of 1980. Then topic number 2, the planned collapse of America's banking system. Topic number 3, the new age of warfare by stealth. Isn't it interesting how prophetic this from 1980 is? Election surprises, collapsing of the banking system, and stealth warfare. All of those headlines are exactly what we're seeing right now, a planned collapse. And there's lots of evidence for that that's outside the scope of this one show.
And they have road tested it.
Yeah.
It was 2000, look at 80, and then 88, and then
Absolutely.
Look at 2002. You look at 2008. They've road tested the formulas.
Okay, so this is probably going to blow a lot of people's minds here. Topic number 1. I'm reading it right out of there. You can go to that link and get it yourself. For weeks now, Washington has been buzzing about the great election surprise of 1980. Right up to the last minute, all the opinion polls were saying the same thing, that the race would be too close to call. But when the television networks began their election night coverage, instead of saying that it's too close to call and that both candidates are equally likely to win, the TV networks told a radically different story. Only 15 minutes after the polling had closed on the East Coast, NBC declared the entity Ronald Reagan the winner. On the West Coast, the polls were still open, but because he'd already won, the voters started drifting away. Even more shocking, the alleged President Carter himself conceded defeat less than 2 hours later. West Coast polls still had an hour to go at that point, but many remaining voters just gave up. By then, it was fast becoming clear that V machines nationwide had registered a landslide in the name of Ronald Reagan.
And you got to remember,
it's like a bad joke, right? It's going to keep being the same punchline.
But Jimmy Carter was a founding member of the Trilateral Commission.
Yeah, but he was on the outs on this one. Mm-hmm. They didn't like him. They didn't like him as much, for whatever reason.
Oil.
It was an unprecedented state of affairs. So a landslide, which again, the polls had said it was going to be evenly split. So how did it get to be a landslide? The Republican landslide apparently was enormous, and yet we are supposedly told it was a complete surprise. On all sides, political analysts are still rubbing their eyes in disbelief. They're trying out all kinds of excuses to explain why the polls were wrong. Well,
I was there. I was in Washington.
and you remember this?
I remember all of this. I was there.
And it was kind of like an upset for Carter supporters.
They couldn't believe it,
Right.
and that it had started so early, and declaring him the winner and beginning to push Jimmy back into the background.
Right. Even before the people in the West Coast were done voting. It's insanity. My friends, last month I reported that there was one issue that could help defeat the present, what he calls, Bolshevik administration. This is because of at the time, let's just back up and get a little history here. I'll go to this camera. At the time, the prevailing theories about the wrongdoing in the world focused on the former Soviet Union influence, or what was currently Soviet Union influence, and the fact that this group had entities there. So the Bolshevik Revolution in 1917 was actually run by Wall Street. This is widely known now. Wall Street financed the transformation of Russia into the Soviet Union, put out all of these socialist programs, communism, all this kind of stuff. This was Wall Street, no question.
Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels,
That's
Germans.
Right. Yep. So don't be surprised when Peter starts calling it the Bolshevik administration, because again, he was here tracing it to the Soviet influence, which at that time you could trace it to that easily. So there was one issue.
You can trace it to that today.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And there was one issue that could help defeat the present administration, and that was the breakdown of the hostage release ploy just before the election. So let's talk about that for a second. Again, back to this camera.
Iranians.
And there was, and I remember this because I was born in 1973, so I was 10 years or 7 years old when this was going on. My father every night was so upset as he'd watch Walter Cronkite on CBS and be complaining about the hostages in Iran. The media was making a gigantic deal out of this. My father talked about it every night.
It just means that he was a veteran. That means he served this country,
in Vietnam.
And to look at that period coming after that and to watch the humiliation was more than we could deal with.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So again, for those of you who don't remember this, the term October Surprise, I'll show you this in a minute, originally was coined because apparently, and there's whistleblowers that have come forward, this is now indisputable, legally proven, that the Bush faction made a deal with the Iranians to not release those hostages until after the election, immediately after the election, thereby again giving a plausible reason. This is important. A plausible reason for why Reagan might have won by a landslide, even though the opinion polls said no. It wasn't sufficient enough that if Carter couldn't have gotten them released, it wasn't sufficient enough for everybody to vote against him. But yet, that's the reason, that's the excuse. But if you have a secret technology that you can turn it out any way you want,
sure,
why not use it, right?
You got to remember his foreign affairs, what Carter's foreign affairs position was. His foreign affairs was the oil embargo, okay? And then here came the Iranians seizing and overthrowing the Shah and Khomeini coming in to take over to create what is now the Iranian Republic.
Right,
okay,
with
so
all the suppression of women and everything.
With everything, all of that, okay? So when you look, that would be the reason you could rationalize his ability to act on foreign affairs, and that Reagan called Russia the great evil empire.
Right.
That was a part of his marketing strategy.
Exactly. So, because again, did that really cause Carter to lose the election? Did the American people really turn on him because of that? Apparently not. Apparently it was this rigging. So let's go on. It may be that many voters were affected in the way I mentioned last month. Well, that's a very kind of passively voiced sentence, but he means they stole it. Okay, that's what he's saying. So here again, right now, you can go to the page on Wiki where they talk about October surprise is still there. And it says, in the U.S. political jargon, an October surprise is a news event that may influence the outcome of an upcoming November election. And then the term October surprise was coined by William Casey. I'm now down at the last sentence.
CIA.
When he served as campaign manager of Ronald Reagan's 1980 presidential campaign. And then in this section here where it says 1980 Carter versus Reagan, in the 1980 presidential election, Republican challenger Ronald Reagan feared that a last-minute deal to release American hostages held in Iran might earn incumbent Jimmy Carter enough votes to win re-election. As it happened in the days prior to the election, press coverage was consumed with the Iranian government's decision and Carter's simultaneous announcement that the hostages would not be released until after the election.
In his failed attempt.
That's right. So Carter wasn't able to pull it off. But here's what Peter says. The apparently surprise landslide was actually brought about by entirely different means.
Here we go.
My friends, it was not the opinion polls that were wrong this time. It was the tally of votes on E-Day. Isn't that... I mean, it's so funny. It's so funny. And it's so sad, too, because, Dannion, if people start listening to what we're saying right now, and they take this seriously,
I see the pattern.
I hope that they will start to understand that the whole thing is so goddamn dirty.
Mm-hmm.
It's been dirty the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
You, as we've talked about in other videos, did work on the inside. We're not going to say who you worked for, because that's still classified. But you saw this stuff, right? Mm-hmm. So you're aware. So let me just ask you point blank. Can you confirm with independent intel that you gained firsthand that this kind of stuff is true?
Sure.
Could you maybe give us a little bit of a reason as to why you would say that?
I just witnessed, here comes President Reagan, and here comes George W. Bush, Herbert Walker, in as vice president, and the exact same system that Nelson Rockefeller used was being used again.
Right.
Okay, well, when you work on the inside, the Republican National Committee was Lee Atwater, and he was the head of it, and he got Herbert Walker elected.
Right.
Okay.
Got him.
Exactly. I mean, I watched all of that operate.
Okay.
Okay, so I watch what you're doing, and I see that the same things are being recreated as you tell a story that gives people an option to really take a good look at how exciting of a times that we're living in. This is either the grandest exposure or failure in the writing of our country or becoming socialist.
That's right.
The Communist Manifesto. And that's the two choices that we say we made.
That's right.
That's insane. With more votes than ever in history.
The biggest winner in American history, the winningest man in the world. Nobody's ever won this many votes. Except maybe in India or China or something, right? You could probably win more votes in India. You got 2 billion people.
And I'll stop because those are the slides, but David, they believe that the bulk of us are falling for that.
Well, I don't think so. But, well, maybe they hoped that they would get that.
Okay.
But let's just divert for a second real quick and talk about the present, because I went to sleep on election night. I stayed up as late as I possibly could.
Me too.
And I was watching everything like a hawk. Mm-hmm. And so it was down to, in some of these swing states, when I stopped looking, it was at 91% of all the vote tallies going in. And it is a landslide. It is a landslide for the incumbent, okay? Mm-hmm. Which is exactly what I told you folks. So some people were saying, we had some, well, I'll talk, let me just finish this one thought real quick, and then we'll talk about it, discuss it. The landslide that I talked about in my last video did happen, okay? Because some people were trolling me at the beginning in the comments section. It did happen, but it wasn't allowed to happen. And so we go to bed, and I walked into my, I walked into my bedroom, and I told my wife before I went to sleep, I said, sweetheart, there's no way this is going any different. And that was my famous last words, right? There's no way this is going to turn out any different. The incumbent definitely won. You're going to wake up tomorrow, and Blankety is going to be the president of the United States again. That's what everybody thought. And then right around like 4 o'clock, 4:30 in the morning, all of these numbers start changing in the most mathemagical ways possible. Votes just start appearing out of nowhere. And now, in case you are completely not tuned into reality, there are systematic, massive cases coming out about this. Hundreds and hundreds of pages of sworn affidavits. Scores and scores of insiders who are coming forward to confirm that they were instructed to do this, that they were asked to do this, how it was done, when it was done, where it was done. How did you feel, Dannion, that night, going to bed thinking that it's all in the bag and then waking up in the morning and looking at that?
I couldn't believe it, but I knew it was some elaborate plan. You cannot, from watching the heartbeat of 2 elections and watching the heartbeat of them, okay, you understand things about how Washington works that you never talk about.
Right.
Okay, you understand it, you know. So watching this, I knew that there is no way in political history, in my knowledge of the United States of America, okay, that the way that Joe ran his campaign, and in the mental condition of Joe, that there was any chance, if I had to choose between which I vote for the person who best serves what I believe in.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
I support what I believe in and what I can do to help to make a difference in the things I care about. Okay. And I looked at Joe, and there was no way that he could do it. And I'm a 70-year-old guy that grew up in America. There's no way he could do it. So I would have to choose that. And I know that America thinks like me. Okay? They think like me. You know, you're going to become communist, socialist, Agenda 30.
There were hardly any signs in people's yards. I mean, I've traveled a bunch as we were ramping up for this, and there was no signs. There's no turnout. Nobody shows up. There's hardly any signs. You got these very disturbing videos of him inappropriately touching young people. Multiple examples of it. You have this crazy computer situation, I won't even say the L word, involving an associate of his that might be blood related. We'll just leave it at that because that's guaranteed that live stream will just shut down.
Yeah. And
everything's going to stop working if we do that.
I don't want to do that. I want people to see to get a grip on the story that you're telling from a really important point of view, because December the 8th, all the talk and everything that goes on, if you believe in the American Constitution, the GSA and the Electoral College, each state comes forward on December the 8th. Okay, so whatever...
And the GSA is refusing to certify the one who declared himself president-elect.
Or they will certify.
Well, they haven't yet. That's the point.
But wait, no, it doesn't happen until December the 8th. Okay,
however, there is a GSA provision where the transition is supposed to be paid for when the president-elect is declared, and they get their money to pay for moving, and they're not getting that money because the GSA will not certify it.
Okay, that happens on December the 8th.
No, it happens before that. I looked this up. We
Constitutionally.
don't need to argue on camera.
Constitutionally.
Well, yes, that's different. The GSA is a separate thing where you get your money as soon as you're declared president-elect, and they're not doing that.
Well, because he's not the president.
Right. And the federal election chairperson is not certifying it either. So this is crazy.
So December the 8th is when this game really matters. What you're telling people is showing them it's going to really matter to see the history of what's going to happen.
I think it's going to be sooner than that. One of the briefings that we got that may or may not be right, but sure looks like it, is that some major actionable evidence will begin to be formally presented as of Friday. That's what we're starting to hear. So I hope that's true. All right, back to the slides. This is a really great example that I want everybody to think about and see, okay? This is Peter's own story of him running for the governor of West Virginia and what happened to him. This is so insane. Listen to this. To bring home what I am about to tell you, I would like to tell you a personal story. It's a story of my own race for the governorship of my home state of West Virginia 12 years ago, as of 1981, or whenever it was he was doing this, 1980. The idea that I run for governor came from a political leader in West Virginia. I was then in my 6th year as legal counsel to the United States Export-Import Bank here in Washington. Well, now, according to Pete Peterson, he worked at the company, quote unquote, and Peter had a desk right down the hall.
I knew that as soon as you told me what he did.
That's for people who don't catch on this stuff as easily as you and I do.
I catch
So
it.
go to this camera now and tell them what that means.
They're describing someone that's working for an intelligence agency.
And why is that?
Well, because whenever you're moving money and looking at money and import, export, the control of commerce becomes a part of that. Mm-hmm. And how you control commerce, what you're selling, what agrees, what you're doing, and all that deal making that either feeds people or don't. We are the breadbasket. Okay, so what we traded for was control of oil and food. Mm-hmm. So if you look at in his 6 years...
Don't forget to look people in the eye, too.
If you look at his 6th year as a legal counsel, that means he's in the game.
Absolutely.
So you just reinforce for us, that the story we're hearing is legitimate with what I know about how intelligence people are identified.
Right. And let me also just point out real quick that everybody had the opportunity to tear him apart with these audio letters because they were published. None of this has been disputed. Okay, so that he had these positions, it's all been fully verified. So in 30 seconds, a hater could say, "Oh, this is BS, BS." It's not true. This has been standing there since 1980.
Well, if I were you, everybody, I would be downloading this stuff because after this gets out, it will disappear.
It's going to disappear.
I promise you that.
That we know for sure.
Come on.
All right, let's dive back into this. I had been appointed to that mysterious position in 1961 by President Kennedy himself. And apparently there were those who remembered my efforts in helping Kennedy win in West Virginia in 1960. In any case, I decided to accept the suggestion. On May 1st, 1967, I resigned from the quote-unquote Export-Import Bank, we won't say what else that is, and returned to my native state of West Virginia. For the next year, I carried out an exhausting grassroots campaign throughout the state. My wife Lily and I went everywhere and spoke to everyone, or so it seemed. There was not a county we missed, and there was hardly a hand that I had not pressed. And from every indication, my campaign was going very well, meaning everything was showing, the polls, everything was showing he was going to win the election, become governor. Then, one night, 2 weeks before the election, only 2 weeks before, Dannion, the telephone rang. This is where it gets really dark. When I picked up the telephone, a voice said, "This is so-and-so." Now, it's interesting here, before we go any farther, let's go to the wide shot real quick. It's interesting here, Dannion, that he doesn't say who they are. But you just found out what he worked for, what community he worked for.
Yeah.
By the very title of the Export-Import Bank.
I get it.
Chief Legal Counsel.
And
so somebody that he used to work with, let's say, he doesn't say that much, but I will. Somebody he used to work with called him up and gave him the quote-unquote gold or lead offer. Right? You either take the gold or take the lead. Or give us the gold in this case. So let's watch this.
This is the deal.
This is the deal. I want to know what the deal is.
How did they structure it?
How do you structure it? I asked what I could do for him, and he replied, "Well, you'd like to have your votes counted, wouldn't you?" Still half asleep, I said, "Of course. What are you talking about?" His answer was, "Well, you know, politics is a business." And then he repeated, "You'd like to have your votes counted, wouldn't you?" By that time, I was wide awake. I replied that there were plenty of county officials and precinct workers to take care of the vote counting. He's being very dodgy. He doesn't want to look at it, right? Okay, so now he's got to get down to brass tacks. I asked him, "Okay, what are you driving at? What do you mean I want my votes to be counted?" "Don't you understand? This is just how it's done.
No question.
If you want your votes counted, it'll cost you $250,000.
And who you gonna tell?
I mean, come on. Now, this is Peter David Beater going from his own testimony, his eyewitness experience of being in this world, going through this thing, and he is testifying this, and it has never been disputed credibly. He showed unimpeachable credibility, and he's a brave whistleblower. So this is him coming forward and saying that they wanted to sell him the governorship for $250,000. So this is a really dumb question, but I want to cut back to this camera real quick and have you answer this. Do you think it's possible, Dannion, that if somebody had the control of these machines, that they would start using them to make money?
No question. No question. I mean, politics is business, and it's a blood sport.
Right.
I lived in it. It's a blood sport.
Did you personally see things like this, examples like this, or were you aware of them through...
I was not aware of the complexity of the voting machines, but I never trusted it.
Right.
I never trusted it, and when I found out about the internet, I knew not to trust it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So $250,000 will get you the election. So then...
But it would have been... The same call would have been made to his opponent.
Oh, yeah.
The same call would have been made to his opponent, whoever paid that money. And whoever was the political person that told him he should run is who he should pay attention to.
And also, with the economy the way it is now, $250,000 is probably like $2.5 million now, at least.
1967.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot different. Not pay a cent. I didn't do things like that. At that point, the caller said, well, it looks like we can't do any business then, and hung up. After putting the telephone down, I just sat there astonished. Finally, my wife Lily said, what was that? And I told her, we just lost the election. Precincts were old-fashioned, paper ballots were used. I did receive votes, but without exception, in every location where voting machines were used, I received no votes whatsoever, not one single vote. You have to laugh. It's so psychopathic.
And
they didn't even allow him to have one vote because he didn't pay for them. He didn't pay for the frickin' votes.
We are teaching you. Got it. This is the control.
Dude, this is crazy, right? I mean, like, and how have they been able to keep all of this stuff so secretive that still in the MSM right now, there's never been a real problem with any U.S. election. Yeah, there was a 2000 thing, but it's very sound. The electoral process is sound.
But look at what you're showing, David. If you just look at what you're showing and you match it to today, you take it and you match it to today, and the more advanced as it is, but this is my crisis with the BS or whatever you want to call them, the absolute sheer arrogance that they operate with.
I know.
That arrogance that we are some dumb tribal movement that you can maneuver us like sheep. We are just not that. It's like when we argued that in our last presentation together, we are not a racist nation. We are not a racist nation, and we predicted that they would fail at that. We are not a racist nation, and
I think there's pockets of it, but as a whole, we're not. I mean,
they
there's
lost.
Always radicals.
They couldn't start a war.
Yeah,
they couldn't start a war.
Yep.
So it's pretty amazing to see how this so importantly evolves.
Next interesting part of this that I'm about to show you, Peter actually had the guy who did this, the guy who rigged the machine, come in with a Baptist minister and start crying and confess to what he did. That's what you're about to see next. This is amazing. Look at this. Then about 2 weeks after the election, I received a phone call from a Baptist minister. He was asking to meet me because something important had come to his attention, so the next day I met the minister in a town near Brinkley, West Virginia. He had another man with him. The good minister told me that it's not up to me as the minister to forgive you, it's up to Mr. Beater. Does he want to do it or not? So I asked the minister's friend what it was that he had done to me, and he said, Mr. Beater, I fixed the voting machines against you. And then he blurted out the whole thing. He said that he was known as a repairman for these machines, but he explained that when he went to the factory school from the voting machine company in another state, whatever is wanted. There you go. For example, voters who pulled the lever for me thought they were voting for me, but inside the machine would be adjusted to transfer the vote to another pre-selected candidate. So Dannion, this is why not vote and automatically vote it for the other guy.
And that's mechanical.
Unless you pay $250,000.
But that's mechanical.
That's mechanical.
Look
the machine cannot vote for this man. It's impossible. It only
That's
registers.
why he got none.
That's why he got none.
Now we're in the
Isn't
internet.
this amazing?
Yes,
Yeah.
my God. And it's so, it brings reality from the beginning. It's not just something that's happening now.
That's
it's
right.
something that's been continuously happening that we're now aware of.
And by the way, I mean, even though I'm kind of laughing and excited about this, I'm also disgusted by this information. I'm horrified, and I want you to have it. I want you to know the truth. Because how are we going to ever get anything, how are we ever going to get the public vote to be real, to be fair, to be warranted if this is what's going on? And remember, Peter had a witness now, a guy who was willing to ask for forgiveness. He confessed, which means that's provable in a slide now. I could hardly believe my ears as he was confessing that he rigged these machines. Over a year of grassrooting the state down the drain, and all because of a specialized slot machine known as a V machine. I asked him why he did such a thing. He was not the only one, that there were others all over the country doing the same thing. Then he broke down and cried. He said he wanted me to know and to decide if I wanted to forgive him. By this time, all three of us were in tears. I placed my hand on his shoulder and I said that I did forgive him. Later, I went to the fraud section of the United States Department of Justice here in Washington. They told me that the governor's race was merely a local matter, so the federal government could not investigate. Isn't that convenient? I also looked into other avenues for possible legal redress through the document. He's a top attorney hired by Kennedy to be an attorney. And in the end, the courts always do nothing. So ended my governorship race in West Virginia in 1968. So right there, the implication, folks, is that the court system itself is rigged. So there is nothing going on that's going to stop this. You can't go and call, but he did have two witnesses, and they refused to hear him. They said, "Oh, that's state. That's not federal." Okay, back to the slide.
But it shows it's rigged.
It's totally rigged. In every presidential election since voting machines have been used, there have been charges of V fraud in certain states, in every election. And that goes back to the pretty obvious. If there's too many people voting, you know,
Like
you
in
don't have
Nevada.
enough population.
Like in Nevada, 104%.
So look at this now. There are people nicknamed the Lever Brothers in Western Virginia, which is this guy was one of them, who go around and pull the levers before the actual voting begins. There are others who tamper with the machines in their warehouses before they are delivered to the polling places. And there are corrupt officials who know all these things but keep their mouths shut, either for fear or for money. Again, gold or lead, right? We're either going to give you the bribe or we're going to shoot you.
Or someone you care about.
Important. VMs are not regulated in any way. They were developed from slot machines, which of course are built to be. There you go. But then long ago, they were absorbed into the hands of the Rockefeller cartel, as I detailed, and we already read that. And then the secret struggle over the E, which I reported last month, remember this is right after the 1980 E had happened, voting machines were the decisive secret weapon. There you go. For the moment, they have carried the day for the Rockefeller oil cartel.
I told you it'd be about oil.
Right.
Having the same structure.
Same system. Voting was the decisive secret weapon. As the V began on November 4th, 1980, the entity President Carter was in Plains, Georgia to vote. Reporters on the scene said later that Carter almost broke down and cried as he was speaking to townspeople because the outcome was already known before the voting began. And he knew about it. That is also the reason for his unprecedented concession an hour before the West Coast polls had even closed. Word had reached the White House only the day before about what was going to happen. So let's again stop right there for a second. Imagine that you are President Carter, the President of the United States, and the day before the E actually happens, you get told, "Oh, don't worry, you're going to lose. We've rigged all the machines."
Mm-hmm.
I mean, once again, I hate to keep repeating this, but this is insane. And the guy, "Don't worry, you're not going to win."
He was a part of the organization that was in control of doing it.
That's a good point.
Okay, and
That's a
also
good
this
point.
too. He was interested in UFO research because in Russia he saw one. At the same time all this is happening, he's the one pushing to try to ask for this information about
Right.
UFOs.
He wanted real disclosure.
Okay, so
and he didn't get it.
And so here you go again. You're worrying too much, or you're paying attention to stuff that's none of your business, Jimmy. You need to start paying attention to peanuts because
Right. How about you stop paying attention to UFOs?
yeah,
and
because Billy talked a lot about this. His brother Billy,
Billy Carter.
talked a lot of. He was talking about how bad it hurt his brother, and then his sister. She was the evangelical person that was a big friend of the Penthouse guy. And,
Right.
yeah,
Larry Flint.
Yeah, and so here this family became because he was one of the first UFOers.
That's right.
And-
And that might have been part of why they threw him out.
I'm not going to not let that go.
Absolutely. Thank you. So, back to the slide now. There was massive fixing of VMs in 9 states. Massive. So, we're going to start with the massiveness. This is 1980 again, okay? Pennsylvania. That sounds a little familiar, doesn't it, folks? Florida. That sounds familiar. Ohio. Illinois. Michigan. Texas and California.
That's all your electoral college.
So that's, yep, there you go. All the swing states.
That wins.
The machines were also fixed, but on a less complete scale, in Indiana and Missouri. And in addition, there was selective fixing of machines in the key districts of more than 20 other states. It was all over before it started. This is based on his inside intelligence, of course. That means 31 out of 50 U.S. states, all the ones that matter, were already rigged. Now, instead of 40 years, I want to fast forward 20 years. And that brings us to the infamous 2000 presidential election. Remember if you saw this at the time or not. I'm going to get your real-time comments on this. Sherman Skolnick, his name is. And here he is holding a book on who's who in blankety blank, and we're not going to say the word or the acronym. But Sherman Skolnick was really awesome because he would go after corrupt judges. And so here he is, back in 1969, literally taking on the Illinois state election. There he is, taking on the very thing we were just talking about in the very time that we were just talking about, jumping in on that stuff that Peter was already talking about. Now, this is what is so insane, Dannion. It was only insane to me at the time. Now it makes perfect sense in light of all this information. Peter Beater, going back to the slide again, predicted the 2000 election crisis in advance in writing. I read it on the day it came out, Halloween 2000. And there's the link on Jeff Rentz's webpage. You can still go there right now. J. Rockefeller, quote-unquote, president. And remember, again, October 31st, 2000. And there he is saying, and this is before the election, this is days before, I have strong reasons, I'm going to just jump ahead and do it this way. I have strong reasons from profound sources to believe that a so-called emergency, the day it came out on October 31st, 2000, and I asked myself when it started to happen, how in the hell did he know that? Well, the answer is obviously he was on the inside. He had real information. So let's go back to that slide and read a little bit more here, where he says, so he says again, I have strong reasons for profound sources to believe that a so-called emergency may follow the year 2000 presidential election. He said this on October 31st, before anything happened. Nobody would, Danny, and just to remind people who weren't alive back then, was anybody expecting an emergency for the 2000 election?
No, it was governor for Texas. That means he could run. He had the Bush legacy. He had his father. He'd come in and he had all of that. And he had Al Gore, who was a vice president.
Reading this, Dannion, was one of the most mind-blowing things in my early career, because to get an intel briefing that says something that specific, and just days later it's freaking right.
I was going back to think of the J. Rockefeller interaction in my life at that time period. What was happening?
Let's finish reading this. So, I have strong reasons for profound sources to believe that a so-called emergency may follow the year 2000 presidential election, and there is a further scheme to install Nelson's brother, J. Rockefeller, as the unelected president or king of the U.S., all without having him on the presidential election ballot. Well, that didn't happen, but that's what they were ultimately jockeying for. But then Bush was able to outsmart them, obviously.
Right, absolutely.
That's what he did. Prior to the year 2000 presidential election, so-called pollsters and pundits made quite an effort to unhinge the brain of the average American with a barrage of quote-unquote polls. The only poll I respect is the one firemen slide down on from upstairs in the fire station when the bell rings. The polls are totally ridiculous. And they were wrong again.
And now we know that.
Yep.
I mean, think about what you're showing. You're showing a chronologue history of corruption that is now coming to a head. It's coming to a head, but having this viewpoint, David, is so important because it balances out what we're looking for as opposed to the edicts and crap we're listening to.
And what I'm going to say right now is that Skolnick's testimony is admit need be that I read this before the election because you can prove it. A lot of people did. I don't know if you saw this.
No.
Had you ever been on Jeff Rentz's show?
No.
Okay. Neither had I. I've never been on Jeff Rentz. But anyway.
I don't know him.
He's never allowed me on his show, and I wish that he would have, but, it's a weird situation. Anyway.
I'm going to call him.
Same thing with Alex Jones. Alex has never let me on his show. But anyway, Jeff's website back then was really the only place to go to aggregate these kind of links together. It was the premier place to get this information. Everybody back then knew that. Since my story, this is Skolnick again. Since my stories are often so far ahead of the parade, they are often misunderstood by those without our benefit of some 1 million documents, records, tapes, and details from his insiders. I do not reveal my sources. I do not want to hear that one of my sources later was in a plane that somehow blew up, or that his or her body was found floating in the canal. Now look at this.
Happened all the time.
I know, and we could talk about that too, but everybody knows that. To protect my sources, I have, in the 40 years as an activist, been jailed 8 times for contempt of court simply for refusing to divulge the identity of my sources or how exactly in jail. And bless him for never ratting anybody out.
Amen.
I mean, that is so awesome. And so, again, this particular article influenced me so much, and Skolnick in general influenced me so much, that I decided from that day forward that I must adopt the same ethics code that he has, which is, I would rather take
something that I sincerely, being in your world and watching all the crap that you've gone through and what happened, because you will not break that oath. And the stuff that I see and the things that I know about from us being as close of friends, you and I and Elizabeth, as close of friends as we are, I commend you.
Well, thank you. And I haven't given away most of the stuff you told me either.
And that's the part I like
so
the
you're
most.
You want all this to be true, right? It's very important that it stays true. No, this is my ethics code, folks, and I've always been this way. So let's go back to what Peter or Skolnick has to say here.
But one more thing. I watch the hours of research you put in. I watch the diligence to it and the sources of information that you compile into these slide presentations. It's damn.
Reading Skolnick. It was the big insider source of the day. Just like later on you had other guys doing it. It was all Skolnick back then. He was on Jeff Rentz all the time as a guest. He wrote tons of articles. They were very revealing. They
Is
showed
he still
you all
alive now?
No, he died, unfortunately. And his website got sanitized, so the only way you can find it now is going to the Rentz link. So, anyway, back to this slide. This, remember, was written on Halloween night, and he asks this question before it happened. Will King, at least in Moscow in the past, when there was a so-called emergency, they would play somber symphonic music on the radio for 24 hours.
That is so funny. Now, at least we haven't had that yet.
No music. Where's my music?
I agree, because nobody listens to it.
Nobody wants to believe this stuff.
They can't.
Okay, so now we're going to...
You're proving what people feel is true.
And it's all along.
Yeah.
It's this trail of breadcrumbs, the whole
You're proving
history of U.S. elections from the beginning of mechanical voting machines to today. It's never stopped. Now let's back to the slide again. On December the 8th, after this actually happened and he was proven correct, which, by the way, he didn't even take credit for being right. Other people, covert operation. And obviously his implied answer is yes, or he wouldn't have titled it that way, right? I'm not going to say that word or that acronym. Old-timers with covert operations expertise, I think I might have one here today, felt in their in spy parlance, they suspected the American people are victims of quote-unquote black ops. Well, there you go.
And that's true.
It is true. Invoking national security, they love to do that. The U.S. block ordered the major press and wire services to play down, if not entirely omit, any possible clown complicity mentioned in an Associated Press story that was later removed or spiked. So they got to play it down. Thursday, December 7th, 4:15 a.m., this is again 2000, Florida official admits helping the GOP, and then the part that's not on the rest of the headline would be helping the GOP win the election, which means steal the election. By Vicky Chacher, Associated Press writer in Tallahassee, Florida. This got removed from the internet. Remember you, Bush. A former blankety-blank agent said he was trying to help GOP voters. A county election official said she let Republican operatives correct absentee ballot applications. Uh-oh. Is that not legal, would you say?
It's illegal.
It's totally illegal. You can't let them help you correct the... Look at how many is involved. Okay, back to the Thursday in the contested election. In Leon County Circuit Court, attorneys representing voters who alleged Republicans tampered with absentee B application forms asked judges to throw out as many as 25,000 absentee Bs from Seminole and Martin counties. So there again, they were
system.
They were helping. They were over here. They were helping the Republicans.
It was in the hundreds.
It was the hundreds. Yeah, it was nothing. So what does this show you?
It was 600 disputed ballots.
It was something like that. It was really small. So what this shows you is that by helping ballots that would be legally disqualified, which means marking them, altering them, okay, that's V tampering. V meaning, you know what that means. It's V tampering, folks. 25,000 of them. And it was in the AP. And then they had to get rid of it. Okay, let's keep reading. Charles Kane, wait till you get to know this guy. Maybe you do know.
I know who he is.
Oh, you know who he is. Oh boy, here we go. Charles Kane, who testified he worked for the FBI and retired from the blankety blank in 1975, said nothing secretive and sinister occurred. We had an obligation to them, he said, of Republicans who had received an inaccurate ballot document. Of course, you have an obligation to win, right? Oh my God. You have an obligation, huh? Well, it's not legal. We had filled out their forms. He frickin' admitted it. We did not see this as altering. All we saw this as was correcting a problem caused by the Republican Party of Florida, those nasty people. A later AP version, Skolnick says, omitted all of the above matters. So let's get to know a little bit more about this guy from Skolnick, Charles Kane. Which, by the way, in case you don't already know this, the DS, or whatever you want to call them, they are in love with the last name Kane because they see that as the bloodline of Lucifer. In other words, let's go over here. Their religion stipulates that there were two bloodlines from Adam and Eve. There was the bloodline of Isaac and the bloodline of Abraham, I believe it is. And then one of the two, I forget which one, becomes, the son is Cain, and that becomes the Cain bloodline. And I think it's Isaac, right?
I don't think, yeah. I'm not sure.
Okay, I'm not sure either. Okay, I don't remember all the details, but the bottom line is that if you get into their religion, they believe that the name Cain represents the bloodline of their heavenly father, which is a lot different than ours. And in two very recent presidential elections, the name Cain was either in the vice president or the presidential slot. You have McCain with Palin, and then you have Hillary, who ran with Kaine. Kane. Okay. So and then he's got the last name. So this is like if you're a Muslim and your last name is Muhammad or your first name's Muhammad. They love that. And same thing with the DS. Okay, so let's learn more about him from Skolnick.
Even deeper, but take it one step deeper. We're not just talking about the politics of world control and domination. You're talking about a religious order.
Absolutely.
That's the point that you just established.
That's
It's
right.
deeper than the political likeness that we make fun of as we watch it. And you're exposing a deeper subtle agenda.
It gets really stinky when you get into this stuff.
Think about what you're saying, and it's true.
And think about that creepy picture I showed you at the beginning when we zoomed in on the eyes. I mean, whoa! And that's the one they used. That's the picture they used. You zoom in on the eyes, and it's like
There's nothing there.
It's like crazy, okay? Here we go. Even in the apparently suppressed story, Associated Press left out plenty. And here's what Skolnick has to say. Retired blankety blank and other agency covert operations agents contend the Charles Kane who testified in the Martin County, Florida case is the same Charles Kane they have known for many years, and apparently you knew about him too. Mm-hmm. They describe Charles Kane as being reportedly as follows. Now, before we read that, this is an actual picture I found today. It says Charles Kane, Martin County, Florida Republican Party Executive Committee member on C-SPAN during campaign 2000. So you can go online today and you can watch his entire testimony as he said, oh, everybody should move on. There's nothing to see here. No big deal. So let's go into what Charles Kane is all about. According to Skolnick, when he was younger, Charles Kane reportedly looked almost exactly like Lee Harvey Oswald of President John F. Kennedy. Several assassination researchers in their magazine articles and books have described how Oswald was framed up with situations, quote unquote, involving Oswald lookalikes. The book, he's not actually, let's go to the close shot, yeah. So this is where he's being very cagey. He's not actually saying that Charles Kane was a lookalike, but obviously he knows that he was, and probably because of some oaths that he signed or something. So, Dannion, let's just talk about that for a minute.
Being smart.
How could you use a guy who looks just like Oswald? What would be an example?
The legendary picture of Oswald with a rifle. That anybody who understands the graphics now knows that head was his head was placed on there. That it never was Oswald holding this rifle in the picture.
Oh, wow.
So if you had situations where you would put him at a Cuban event, which was always the Cuban issue, you'd put this same lookalike at events so that you would put a time and a date that he was there.
Oh, I see.
So you create the narrative of who you want him to be identified as.
Right. So they build the whole backstory
Using
with
a
stand-ins.
lookalike.
And people say, oh my God, that's him.
And he was there and I saw him.
Wow.
When it really wasn't him. Same clothes, same lookalike. This is
You
probably...
saw Charles Kane working as a lookalike for Oswald?
No.
Oh, okay.
But I understand how it works.
Right.
I know exactly what you do to build a backstory. And I can listen to what you're describing and see how the backstory would work.
So this guy's a professional, skilled operator who's going to go in there, do the job, pose as somebody else, and never break a sweat and never act like he's anybody other than Lee Harvey Oswald.
Here's the most important point about that. The only way that he could operate in America was through the FBI. He worked for the FBI, but he retired from the CIA, which means how he could break the law. The CIA is not allowed to operate inside of America.
Or whatever we're going to call it.
Well, whatever you want to call it. They could not break it, so they would run him. They would run control through the FBI, which is domestic, and still accomplish their same project.
Right. So they work as a joint unit, is
So
what you're
that
saying.
you can bypass the law.
To get rid of the domestic problem.
Yeah,
Okay,
to
that's
bypass
very
the law.
interesting. That's very interesting. So this book, suppressed in the U.S., Farewell America, has an extensive detailing of this very thing. And I guess we could probably look that up. Okay. Next, Charles Kane was reportedly part of the blankety blank's super secret, bloody, dirty tricks project. So what would bloody, dirty tricks be about? Super secret, bloody, dirty tricks.
Whatever it took to win. Whatever it took to achieve the goal.
In any country.
America, Get what year with the time period you're talking about.
Next one. Charles Kane reportedly played a role in blankety blank's aborted invasion in 1961 of Cuba at the Bay of Pigs.
Same people.
Same thing.
All the way through, it's the same people.
Right.
All these people came from the Bay of Pigs.
Blankety mafia gangsters. Now that they're combining those two together, including Sam Momo Giancana, murdered with an OSS special type assassin gun in blankety blank. Kane was also reportedly active with Johnny Roselli, a blankety blank mafia operative murdered shortly after Giancana.
But he was the hitman.
Well, yeah.
Johnny was a...
Now look at this. Some as Sam and Chuck Giancana with Bettina Giancana double-cross the explosive inside story of the mobster who controlled America. Very interesting. Now look at this.
He had the same girl.
Including Giancana, plant 8,000 fraudulent ballots in Chicago that enabled John F. Kennedy to carry Illinois. He betrayed them, but isn't it interesting, Dannion? I mean, it actually makes me really sad. Let's go to this one again. It makes me really sad to say that there's compelling evidence that JFK might have stolen this election in 1960. However, we have, for whatever reason, they didn't want Nixon yet.
That's his father.
Right?
Remember, that's his father.
Right.
His father did all that. JFK didn't do any of that.
Let's go back over to Dan.
JFK didn't do any of that. His father, the military-industrial complex, and the ability to wage war and how that was working, he was listening. So he brought his brother in as the Attorney General. And the Attorney General was going after the mafia, Hoffa, all the mobsters. He was going after Johnson. He was going to wipe that money-making control.
These are my speculations, but why do you think they might have wanted to rig it for Kennedy and not Nixon? What might be some reasons why they wanted Kennedy? Why the DS would want Kennedy before he turned on him?
Because his father could control him. He thought his father could control him.
Okay.
His father was, he was the insider. He was Roosevelt's man, who's to establish this dynasty, which is what his father's dream always was. And it was for Joe. It was JFK's older brother that he had designed it, but he got killed in World War II. So it left him making a hero out of him. Federal Reserve out. He was going to print Treasury notes.
I know, it's so beautiful. So Pete Peterson, I think this is a good time to say this. Pete Peterson, one of my classified, he said that he was actually there in the room when Bobby Kennedy was shot. And that Joe Kennedy, Sr., the insider reports, and I don't have the slide for this right now, but
I would believe that was true.
The insider reports are that Carter is a half Kennedy. That Carter was the illegitimate son of Joe Kennedy when he was with... I don't have a slide for that. You have to do this online somewhere else. But they look a lot alike. So I don't know if that's true. It's just a rumor that I'll have another one in the White House within 10 years.
Well, that would be the nature of his father. That would be the absolute
He's that
nature.
Evil, huh?
He was that bought into control.
Wow.
He was that bought into control. I don't have any ranks, admiral, and coming up through Nimitz and all of those old DSers, the people who developed after World War II that created the OSS into that gang of clowns, that created Rockefeller and West Virginia, and then why Georgia? Right. Why would you take him from the South? Why would you consolidate the South?
Right.
Why would you do it at that time? And why... when Bush, the same things put itself in place. But keep going.
So let's think about how mad Nixon might have been to have the election stolen out from under him and to know it, obviously. So he got his revenge. That's the next part.
We call the family jewels.
Nixon later played a key role at blankety blank's base immediately, and that's just the way these things go. He's playing the dirty tricks, and then he becomes president. And it was only after Nixon became president that the war on Vietnam really ramped up. And that's when my father had time. We're already at an hour and 45 minutes here. So Charles Kane was for many years reportedly part of the executive action, but in more recent years, dirty tricks, short of actual political murders, although in the past they were doing...
But that's not true at all.
Did you ever hear the term executive action?
Okay. Everybody knows what that term means. It's called sanction with extreme prejudice.
Extreme prejudice, David.
Yeah, that's the other word for it.
Make it real messy.
Sanction with extreme
We got to
prejudice.
joke about it because it's so horrible. It's the only way you can.
But you're weaving all.
And they rolled out.
We may be being tricked.
You think?
My God, think about it. Look. I mean, look at the. Well, you'll do it.
All right.
The voting systems today.
Back to the slide. Has the blankety blank's complicity in orchestrating the floor blankety blank surfaced by way of the testimony of Charles Kane? That was his pet theory of why would this guy come forward? Maybe there's two factions or something. I don't think that's what it is. Why then was he a witness in the Martin County case? I think just as a disinformation specialist. Would you agree with that, or do you think...
I would agree with that 100%.
Yeah. Okay, good. Let's keep going. This is really, really interesting, folks. Look at this.
He knew he would get away.
1876 by Gore Vidal. And he says, Skolnick says, he's a distant relative of Albert Gore Jr. Fancy people use their grandmother's last name as their first name. So here is the book, 1876. Notice that Lady Liberty has been blindfolded. Here's another version of the book. It was a #1 bestseller. Gore Vidal, top author of his time. And sure enough, just as Skolnick said, I checked it today, and it is true. This book was reprinted on February 15th, 2000. So here it is on Amazon right now. 1876, a novel, paperback, February 15th, 2000. And then it says right here, if you read this whole thing, and we have this quoted later, so we'll go back to that. The point is the deep state has to tell you what they are doing, right? So if they're going to steal an E, they have to let you know that they plan to do that in advance.
I watch the politics of it, and I understand how evil all of that is.
Right.
And understand how operatives work. But each time that they have to tell us, then that's some ritual or tradition that's deeper than politics, intrigue, murder, all that. It's something much deeper, which is what better everybody needs to grasp that as a perspective. There is something really deep.
They're doing because it gives them. Let's go over again. It gives them apparently the authorization. That's what we hear from insiders, is that with very, very big pockets, very huge amounts of money involved, huge amounts of intent involved, and it's very specific. It's like dialing an IP address. So if they want something to get done, if they want something to work that involves screwing us, they have to do this. They have to let us know in advance. Then apparently there's some universal law that just works, and they're aware of it, that if we know, at least if we have the opportunity to know that we've been screwed, then the
Pathetic.
So they have to do this, folks.
Okay.
They have to do this over and over again to tell you what they're doing, to show you their symbols, show you their iconography. So republishing this book in February when the election is in November, and the book totally lays out the exact blueprint that they followed for the 2000 election, exactly the same. And we're going to read that right now. So let's go back to the slide. Check this out.
This is so great, David.
Isn't it? Isn't it?
Great.
Thank you. I'm trying to keep it in. We're going to be at 2 hours pretty quick, but we're going to get through this. And we'll hopefully be not more than 2.5 hours.
Well, let's do it.
So, okay, so this is actually from Amazon that I just was on, where it says this. The centennial of the U.S. was celebrated with great fanfare, and perhaps the most underhanded political machination in the country's history, the theft of the presidency from Samuel Tilden in favor of Rutherford B. Hayes. This was the Gilded Age. Now, this is in the description for the book, right? When robber barons held the purse strings of the nation, and the party in power was determined to stay in power. Done by robber barons who hold the purse strings, and they're determined to stay in power. They tell you everything about what they're doing right there. That's the whole revealing of the method, as they like to call it. They have to reveal the method.
I see. I mean, it just makes so much sense.
Yep. Now let's go back to Skolnick and what he has to say about this weird thing. Originally published in 1976 by Random House Incorporated, the last 80 pages or so of the book give the details of the Samuel Tilden Rutherford B. Hayes election struggle of 1876. This was an extremely close election, where one candidate got a plurality of the national popular vote, and the other got the majority electoral college vote, which is exactly what happened in 2000. Gore won the popular vote and lost the electoral vote in the Supreme Court. Conspiracy theorists assert that the year 2000 election seems to use the book 1876 as a nearly exact blueprint for how the nation could be divided up. Tilden, according to Gore Vidal's book, never conceded, but lived out his life contending that he had been the elected president. And here the poor guy is Tilden, probably working off some nasty past life karma to have to go through all this, but we do feel bad for him. And this whole thing nearly triggered a war. As Skolnick says, Tilden sought at the site of the presidential inauguration to be sworn in as the elected president, and he was actually blocked by armed troops. As recreated in Vidal's book, the country almost boiled over into a second American Civil War over this election theft. And then
It's incredible.
They reprint the book in 2000, just months before they do it again.
Well, we better make sure they reprint it this month. Last month.
Little known to the public, all the major establishment news networks and newswire services about to run stories about the American blankety blank must get prior clearance from the agency. In the U.S., there is a non-statutory version of Britain's Official Secrets Act requiring articles to be circulated affecting national security to be first submitted to be approved. Based on anything that you might think, do you believe this is true?
Absolutely.
Okay, fair enough.
I can guarantee it's done that way. Or if you print it, it disappears before it makes it into print.
And that's what he's going to say right here. In a like fashion in the U.S., such articles have to be submitted in advance to the blank censorship board or a similar, almost unknown agency or commission. British press outlets and newswire services that run afoul of the law are subject to having their equipment, presses, radio, and television transmitting instruments, buildings, and vehicles seized by the London government. There you go. If you don't do this, you're going to get shut down. On the other hand, American outlets, under presidential edict rather than law by Congress, if accused of being about to violate quote-unquote national security, which means don't say those three letters, they are subject to having their satellite links blocked by the super-secret Satellite Operations Agency, the National Reconnaissance Office, NRO.
In Chantilly.
Their websites can be shut down, and their wire service connections, domestic and overseas, terminated, just like you said, Danny, and there it is.
And all their calls and all their emails have already been recorded.
That's right.
So then you build the same story. You create a story for who they are and what they are.
And remember, all the way back in 2000, they were talking about Echelon back then, and the fact that all these things are being captured, and it wasn't until 2013 with Snowden that we actually got that publicly. But all of these same people like Skolnick, they were talking about this way back before it ever became known to everyone. The U.S. Secret Service reserves the arbitrary power to themselves to keep uncooperative journalists from attending important press conferences by denying them mandatory press credentials and security clearances, thus making the uncooperative journalists unemployable. The American blankety blank and their privatized adjuncts, such as reportedly Wackenhut, have long engaged in overthrowing foreign governments, assassinating popular U.S. leaders and officials, and causing fake foreign and domestic emergencies and coups. Well,
I would say that was true.
and you could double click on that last one there and think about a lot of stuff in this year and wonder, I wonder.
Well,
Anyway, that's all we're going to say.
In the last 16.
Oh, yeah. I mean, this is what they do, and you know this.
This is 16.
You were on the inside. You know all this.
I know exactly this is how it works.
Why is it hard, then, to believe they would not also orchestrate on a vast scale the overthrowing of the American government to favor, for example, the British itching to return us to a puppet colony status? Some contend we may see the American Constitution overthrown by such means and the nation run by martial law as a way of dealing with an expected U.S. financial debacle. This was nearly a year before 9/11. So let's go back and look at that again, folks, because remember, this is in 2000, before that happened, okay? And what does it say right there? A year before. That we may see some kind of martial law and an expected U.S. financial debacle that overthrows the Constitution. Well, what we saw was actually the USA Patriot Act which, as
coming
you
through.
well know, is exactly the same as the German Constitution.
And Homeland Security is the same term the Germans used as they consolidated the intelligence. And
Exactly right.
Bushes are German.
And the current group that's causing a lot of trouble, that starts with anti, has the exact same flag as the ones the Germans were using for the same thing. And everybody knows that. It's all over the internet now.
But that symbology becomes so important in the most sinister part that I begin to perceive as you are talking.
The magical practice, right. They got to tell you what they're doing, so they use the same symbols, the same signatures, the same words, the same logos that they used in Germany. Same thing. So that's amazing, because he predicted that in advance, and it actually did have a big economic effect when 9/11 happened.
It's just amazing.
So now we're going to go dial backwards to November 15th. This is after he was proven correct, because remember, he leaked that intel on October 31st, Halloween, right? So he said that there was going to be, that he had profound sources that said there was going to be some kind of constitutional crisis with the election. So then after it started, this is what he said on November 15th. Long-time sources now in retirement in the intelligence community have been contending to him for some time prior to the year 2000 election that it would be orchestrated on a mammoth scale using this prior historical example of 1876 as a blueprint. So he was getting multiple intel leaks well before the election that this was going to all be orchestrated and they'd use 1876 to do it. Some contend the fine hand of the American blankety blank is evident in the year 2000 election ruckus. Through a reported computer glitch, upwards of 65,000 presidential e-ballots disappeared in Tennessee, causing presidential candidate Albert Gore Jr. to be embarrassed by supposedly not carrying his own home state during the election.
Arrogance. The absolute arrogance of them. The arrogance to do the same thing to him as the little guy in West Virginia, to deny his own. Who in the world?
Now you're from North Carolina,
South
right?
Carolina.
South Carolina. Sorry. It's a lot of slides. South Carolina. Anybody? I mean, you're very loyal to your state, right?
Everybody is.
And so, who in the world in Tennessee wouldn't vote for Gore?
Ain't gonna happen.
It's Tennessee. I mean, there's loyalty in the South, right?
Exactly.
You've talked to me about this. The
Well,
Northerners
I
don't really
any-
have that.
I don't have any problems whether he would win his state in a presidential election, because all that stuff matters historically to a Southerner.
Right.
There is a nature of the Southern heritage that you would never deny that. And why you saw me react so fast, of the arrogance of them to deny him that, look at what he got. He got an Oscar, and he gave him $200 million selling energy credits, and he won a Grammy.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't know if he sang any songs, but he won probably a Peace Prize. I mean, they gave him everything, but that is just to let you know how much in control they were. The same thing as it was when the guy ran for the governorship in West Virginia.
And I will say, let's go over here real quick. I will say that other insiders that I had access to told me that Gore was not really a good guy per se. Obviously, he came right out of he was a vice president under Clinton. It's just a difference in strategy of how to handle things. So Gore, according to my sources, Gore represented the British Rothschild side, where their goal was to actually kick the teeth in of the oil cartel and use more of the financial industry, control the world with financial and banking. Okay, banking is British, oil is American, right? So the British side had Gore. What does he do? He comes out with Inconvenient Truth, which, as you said, was an award-winning documentary. Gore was responsible for that. And they want to do these carbon credits and really try to kill the oil industry, whereas the
New Green Deal.
The Bush side was the total oil dynasty, right? So it's the two dynasties fighting over, are we going to kill the oil industry, or are we going to build up the oil industry? And of course,
called the petrodollar, the reserve currency of the world. How do you crush a nation? You destroy the reserve currency of the world. You destroy it. How do you destroy it? You put oil, which is the petrodollar, you put it in dilemma.
Right. So the British side could have been trying to hurt the U.S. because of their plan and what they were going to do the following year anyway.
I don't think that they could have. I think you're describing it exactly the way it operates.
Exactly. So they knew what they were going to do in 2001, which if you look at the Bible, and there's another whole scholarship on this over here again, it is the 2001 September 11th is exactly 2,000 years to the date after the biblically correct birthday of Jesus, supposedly.
The beginning
And
of the Jubilee.
there's a whole thing in the Bible about a particular astronomical alignment that occurs exactly on September 11th, 2001. In fact, right at the exact window of time that the planes hit is the exact biblically correct 2,000-year anniversary, which is supposed to be the return of the Messiah in Christian lore, right? These people hate that stuff. So why not take the exact 2,000-year anniversary of Jesus' alleged birth down to the minute and make it the day in infamy, the most reviled moment in American history?
Well, World War II and the bombing of Hawaii.
Yeah, but there's
And to call it
9/11.
and to call it 9/11.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, to call it that is utter absolute arrogance.
Right.
I
Because it's a psychic driving mind control
that
thing
you
where
are helpless.
you dial 911 to get the
police. You are not helpless. If there's just a phone call away to
Right.
safety, 911. To do that shows the arrogance. I can see the evilness, David,
Mm-hmm.
from watching this, because mine is a surface viewpoint.
right.
Okay, other than the boxes of knowledge, it's a surface viewpoint, but the evilness of the arrogance of how they think we are and how foolish we are, they're going to learn their lesson this time.
Okay, so going back to the slide, it's really ridiculous that Gore didn't win his own state in the deep, deep South.
Impossible.
And then let's go on here. Family patriarch George Herbert Walker Bush has a lot to answer for, which the oil-soaked monopoly press never seems to question. The elder Bush, as we have demonstrated, together with three of his sons, George W. Jeb, who was governor of Florida during this thing in the recount, right? Everybody remembers that. George W., Jeb, and Neil have 25 super-secret bank accounts worldwide, through which they have laundered tens of billions of dollars of illicit funds from dope traffic, weapons smuggling, and clandestine and illegal gold smuggling overseas. Would you say that that's likely to be true?
I'd say it's 100% true.
Okay, fair enough. The Commissar of the Federal Reserve, Alan Greenspan, we prefer to label him Redspan because we're going into the red, right? There's nothing green about it. We're dying here as a country. Through his secret authorization codes, Alan Greenspan arranged these clandestine wire transfers for the Bush family. Isn't that interesting? See our website series, Greenspan Aids and Bribes Bush, and documents thereto attached. And now we finally get to the good stuff, folks. The one you've been waiting for, if you've been itching in your seat, wondering, is David going to talk about it? Is David going to talk about it? Yes, I am. The blankety-blank voting machine scandal. And now we're getting too close to the president. I'm not going to say the word, okay? We're just going to call it the D. The D voting machine scandal. And this was all blown out there by a true American patriot and hero, Congressman Dennis Kucinich, in 2003. Here he is. And the write-up I'm about to read to you, I'm going to read you almost the entire thing because it's so good, was featured on the government's own House of Representatives congressional website, house.gov. So this is real, okay? You can find it now on archive.org if you type in the link in the Wayback Machine. It's now under a tab called Web, but here it is. So this is actually a snapshot of house.gov. It was published originally around December the 2nd, 2003. That's the earliest one I could find on archive. So that's around when it came out. And then it disappeared a couple of years later after he made a very sizable update on April 28th, 2005. So what you're seeing here is the 2005 captures for this particular page. You see April on the top right, and the 28th has got a big blue circle around it. And then you'll notice that when you get into July 1st, now all of a sudden the circles go from being blue, which means nothing has been changed, to being green. So as of July 1st, it turns green. This is only, as you can see, barely 2 months after the final changes were applied, and it disappears and turns into what we call a 302 error every single screen capture on the Wayback Machine after this, this is what you get. An HTTP 302 response at crawl time, meaning it's no longer online. And this one happens to be July 1st, 2005, the very beginning of when this started. And this, if you type in the link right now today, it says the requested page could not be found, finding the page you want, and it's not there. So we're going to drag this out of the memory hole and give Kucinich his due in this historical moment we're in right now and read from the final deleted version of what he had to say. So here we go. Congressman Kucinich is seeking to ensure that voting is a right secured for all Americans. During the 2000s, there were numerous and serious problems at the voting bees in Florida and across the nation. Notice he says serious, numerous and serious. This is a big deal. Congress's response was to pass the Help America Vote Act in 2001, which they then ignored. This legislation was designed to improve voting machines and voting processes. However, implementation of the Help America Vote Act, along with its funding and assistance to states, is far behind schedule, of course. Additionally, a recent analysis of voting machine software shows that these programs suffer, again that word, serious internal flaws that threaten the security of votes cast on such machines. Surprise, surprise. And this is a headline in there, Privatized Voting, Private Interests. Under the Help America Vote Act, or HAVA, which again never went anywhere, the Election Assistance Commission is charged with establishing voluntary standards for voting machine software and creating an independent testing process for the software. However, this process is far behind schedule, and they never did anything.
I was laughing because I know how true that is.
Oh, yeah.
It's ridiculous. Welcome to today.
Without this federal review and testing of software, this is Kucinich on the House.gov website, deeply flawed software has been marketed by companies and bought by states. An analysis of an electronic voting system was recently authored by Tadayoshi Kono, Adam Stubblefield, Aviel Rubin, and Dan Wallach. An analysis of an electronic voting system, that's the name. This voting software, purchased by D, has already been purchased by 2 states. According to this study, some of the most serious of numerous flaws permit a person to, here we go, a person, or in this case a technician on the inside, could vote multiple times for the same candidate. That's illegal, of course. View ballots that were already cast on a machine. Go in there, take a look, take a peek, see how it's going. Modify your party affiliation on your ballot. They could change you from Republican to Democrat. Cause your vote to be miscounted, which means it never gets counted, or it gets counted as the opposite side. Create, delete, and modify the votes on a machine. And tamper with the audit logs and election results. In other words, he says elsewhere, they can go in, they can see how many votes have been cast, they can change them, and then they can erase the record of ever having gone in there and done anything. Doesn't that sound a little bit familiar? Doesn't that sound a little bit like Smartmatic and Dominion and all this crap that's going on right the heck now, which we're not even really going to talk about too much because there's so much evidence it's coming in by the truckload, day after day, week after week now. You're going to see this thing exploding. This is not going to go away, and it is the salvation of planet Earth, in my opinion. Sorry, touching the mic. This is going to save our butt. This is what we needed. And I'm so glad that finally all of this dark, dirty stuff that's been going on the whole time that nobody cared about, they tried to pass laws, they get ditched. Finally, we're dealing with this thing. Finally, it's happening.
I agree. And just watching what you're saying, and when you look at international, how this system is present today, our votes are being counted in Germany or Spain.
So we heard, yes, there was a server in Germany. Yep.
So we heard that the
Merkel
votes,
was in on it, most likely.
Well, I don't know that.
I
don't know that. I'm not going to say that. But if you have a company that is Serbian programmers, and there is our votes are being tabulated in a foreign country.
Well, and remember, I mean, this gets into material that let's go over here. This gets into material that we're not actually, I don't have slides for them because it is so common and heard right now, but if you watch like Sidney Powell, Rudy Giuliani, the people who are on the front lines right now, I highly recommend dig up everything you can on both of them, watch every video, even if you don't like the network they're on, just watch the stuff. Please watch what they're saying, as many as you can. Because what we find out is that this software was invented in Venezuela
By the Cubans.
in order to make sure that Chavez keeps winning. And then when they saw how well it worked, they bought the system and they installed it right here in the good old US of A. Isn't that something?
And it's true.
And history repeats itself yet again. Because the Chavez system worked better than anything else. It was so easy.
The same
it was
way
so
that-
manipulable.
same-
Just like Shoop.
Just like Nelson did.
Yeah, with Shoop. Yep.
Okay, you got it. And it's the same, but
History
we
repeats
are
itself,
not,
folks.
We are not falling for it. This
No.
is the point that, like you said before, people are not standing up, but I believe that people are
Well, now
standing
they are.
up.
Now they are.
Yeah, I mean,
In the past, they didn't.
they
But
didn't.
This is a long-term cancer that we finally have to cut out and remove. All right, back to the slides. So again, some of the most serious of numerous flaws. He's not even describing all of them. There's so many. But you can view, you can modify, you can miscount, you can tamper with the audit. Nobody's going to know what you did. They found 328 security holes. And as a result of this study, this is very significant, folks, the state of Maryland stopped buying the machines. They actually put it on hold. And then later, an independent review confirmed the previous findings. This is actually true, legally provable fact. It counted 328 different security weaknesses in the system. And the conclusion of this secondary independent review was, quote, the system as implemented in policy, procedure, and technology is at high risk of compromise. Obviously.
Welcome to today.
The state of Ohio selected D as one of 4 possible vendors for computerized voting machines. But in August 2003, the company's partisan conflicts of interest prompted public suspicion that the voting machine manufacturer was partisan. This is when it all starts to erupt, August 2003. Partisan conflicts of interest. In August 2003, after returning from President Bush's Crawford, Texas ranch, the chief executive of D wrote a fundraising letter to his own people that he was trying to get money from, where he stated that his company, D, was committed to helping Ohio deliver its electoral votes to the president next year. Was he high or drunk?
No,
or
he's just full of himself.
I mean, my God.
The arrogance that they operate with, the just unwavering arrogance, knowing that nothing's going to happen to them.
Right, and they'll sell you your governorship for $250,000. You want to buy your votes? They'll sell them to you, buddy. How much you want for these votes? Okay, here we go. Back to the slide. Not only have the above memos demonstrated company knowledge of software flaws, but D specifically instructs their employees to misrepresent these flaws under questioning, according to their own election support guide published on October 21st, 2002. This manual is provided to the individuals who work directly with voting machines and systems on Election Day. According to the election support guide, V recounts may yield different B totals instead of improved accuracy. They may yield different totals. Look at this. This is in the manual now. He's quoting from it. And this is again on the House.gov website from Dennis Kucinich, Congressman. Ideally, right? A recount might yield exactly the same results as the initial count. However, in the case of AccuVote operating system ballots, this is qualified by the following considerations. These considerations become increasingly relevant over larger quantities of ballots. Number 1, and they're making all these excuses, right? Poorly cut ballots may not necessarily give identical results upon repeat counts. Wink, wink, right? That's the hanging Chad thing. Number 2, AccuVote OS units with slightly skewed sensors may not necessarily give identical results upon repeated counting. They're telling you what to say when they get caught, folks. That's what this is.
Exactly.
Number 3, refeeding AccuVote OS ballots may smear voting marks across the ballot as well as leave traces of the roller on the ballot, which may not necessarily give identical results upon repeat counts.
To tell you exactly how they're going to do it.
Irrespectively, we must always promote that our voting systems are consistent and accurate. Page 34, even though they know that it's not. They're telling their own people over here, they're telling their own people to lie. We must represent the consistency and accuracy of our results, even though there's these things that could go wrong. So if we get caught, please use these excuses, everybody. That's what he's saying. It's crazy. And then look at this. It goes on from here. Back to the slide. The Election Support Guide instructs employees to deceive customs agents about the fact that they will be working on an election. U.S. Customs. In other words, you come in from a foreign country, you say, yeah, I want to vote. I'm going to the election.
So you'd be a software person. Or
Right. Provide a terse explanation of what your job is, as well as the business the company you work for is in. Under no circumstances should you indicate that you intend on working in the United States. Well, that's fraud.
100%.
They know what you're going to do. And then this is really funny. Look at this one. D employees are instructed to provide as little communication as possible. Section 3.2. You will generally be considered to promote your ignorance.
That is hilarious.
You're generally going to be considered a paragon of knowledge on the election, but don't promote your ignorance. Don't let them know that you don't really know crap. Okay? In case of doubt, call a designated contact who may be more knowledgeable than you. So ridiculous. Let's go back again. Do not offer, that's actually how it was written, do not offer damaging opinions of our systems even when their failings become obvious. In other words, always say that it works. And these are what they're telling their own people right on page 10. Even if you didn't make it that far through the manual, you probably made it to page 10. And that's enough, okay? D's ballot, this is back to Kucinich now. Remember, this is on the government's own Congress website. D's ballot processing components are not completely accurate, but employees are instructed to say that they are, or blame ballot printing or workers for the problem, right? The printing is the problem. Do not promote the fact that the AccuVote OS is anything but absolutely accurate in this case. In case you encounter numerous undefined marks, indicate that ballot printing is at fault. So once again, it's so obvious here. The following two cases are the worst case scenarios when using the AccuVote OS. This is in the manual. Be very diplomatic in both cases, offering the minimum amount of information necessary to officials, like election monitors. If the counter did not increment when the ballot was processed, right? So here's the deal, okay? If you're there and you're running this ballot through the machine,
Right.
and you're saying that it's a vote for Gore, and then it shows up as a vote for Bush, that's what could happen to you, right? They're preparing you for how to handle this, okay? Let's go back and read this. If the counter did not increment when they run the ballot through, well, possibly those workers were not very observant while they were using the AccuVote OS. They're stupid people, you know, they didn't know what they were doing. They weren't paying close attention. They didn't really watch anything. Oh my God. Otherwise, indicate that you are not able to provide an appropriate real time. Just say, well, you weren't looking at it right.
Or
Or if that doesn't work, oh, you just weren't looking. Well, I got to talk to my superiors. I don't know. The system is fine. Nothing ever happens like this. Don't worry about it. Back to the slide again. Unfortunately, again, this is Kucinich. Instead of working to improve voting machine accuracy and security, this document shows that D has attempted to cover up voting machine failings with secrecy and false statements. Congressman Kucinich demands that these flaws should never be tolerated. Correct. These findings of software flaws have been confirmed in internal memos from D employees, which he has on that website, which is now down. D has harassed internet service providers with legal action if they dare to post links to these incriminating memos. Doesn't that sound familiar, folks? Internet takedowns, right? Same thing back in 2000. Transparency and public oversight are essential in the development of V machines. Of course they are. From conversations between employees at D, including upper management, it is evident that they knew of insecure programs and that they knew they were making insecure changes to these programs. In other words, that they could use it to steal. Among these activities, employees did the following, okay, and this is a list. Permitted easy access to vote audit logs without requiring so much as a password. Anyone could access the tabulation of votes and change their contents. And this is in a memo from Neil Finber to Ken Clark, and Ken Clark's response, government-supported evidence existed within the software. This was in a memo from Ken Clark. So once again, no password, anybody can change the contents, anybody can change it, and they sold it while knowing that the problems existed. They knew that the problems were there. They changed the software by sending uncertified patches and upgrades to their customers against their will, along with possible bugs. So they knew they were altering the machines even though they weren't supposed to. And this again, legal proof, memo from Ken Clark. They were written plan, little to no time for testing, and minimal resources. So they're basically lying to you and taking the money and doing something that they can't actually do.
They're achieving the goal.
Well, yeah, the goal is to steal.
Everything is to steal elections, and all that other stuff is just minor problems.
That's true.
Okay. How do you cover the minor
It
problems?
also seems to be an accepted practice to exaggerate our progress and functionality to our customers and ourselves, and then make excuses at delivery time when these products and services do not meet expectations. And this again is D has been using coercive legal claims, this is still Kucinich talking, to intimidate internet service providers and even universities to shut down their websites with links to these memos and remove the content of the memos, which proves something that's very relevant right now. Under copyright laws, however, D has intimidated numerous internet service providers in order to comply with its request. Well, that is evil. And doesn't this sound familiar? But instead of just shaking down some ISPs, how about every person on the entire internet? Now, you literally cannot talk about this stuff.
And no matter
you cannot. You're going to lose your Twitter. You're going to lose your YouTube, Facebook. Representative Kucinich going on the record saying that these machines, that you had backdoor access, you didn't need a password, you could see how many votes there were, you could change them however you want, and nobody's ever going to know anything. And you're updating the software into these districts without them knowing that you did it, to make sure that even if they had corrected your software, at the last minute you pop in the update and make sure it's going to work.
exactly what just happened.
It looks like what happened just now. And they haven't proven it yet, but they're getting ready to.
But David, you're discussing it, and you're given a historical nature from the 30s to the day that's so good for us to look at this history, look at this proof, and then look at today. This is clarifying, helping people to be able to better look at what's going on today instead of the madness that we're being told.
And I also want to point out that you shouldn't be hung up on the D name, the name that they keep upgrading it and changing how it works. We did also hear, Dannion, that in 2016 they had this system in place and they expected that Hillary would do it, but the alliance actually at the last minute countered this with the help of certain agencies that are the good guys in this case, stopped that hacking from taking place so that it was only legal, legit votes in 2016. That's the only reason why we had that landslide. So now they've had to change the machines because apparently the D machines, they figured out some patch that could eliminate that from being done. Matter voted for Hillary in 2016. She has an excellent chance of winning.
And I agree. I am not arguing that because look, the cunningness of how the two factions, what is amazing watching them, we are not as important to the overall viewpoint as the factions seeking to control.
That's right.
Okay, so now as we take a stand or put this stuff out, we become a part of their scenario.
That's right.
So do you think it's true about the real-time observation of this on election night?
Absolutely. You know, isn't it strange that they just kind of got tired of counting? Let's just, we're so tired. Let's just stop counting. Because it's so depressing that Trump is about to win. So let's just stop counting. And then everybody goes to bed, and you wake up in the morning and everything's flipped over. And it's statistically impossible. You have these ballots that have nothing on them except one vote for Joe. That's it. Nothing else. You have
because you had to do so many.
massive abnormalities, right? He's supposedly the winningest guy in American history. Nobody's ever gotten that many votes. But Obama in 2008 had gigantic turnouts on the National Mall, gigantic crowds during his campaigning. You mean to tell me that Joe did better than that by a massive amount? It's an insult to the intelligence. There are probably millions of people. It's probably safe to say that there are millions of people who have been so destroyed by this 5-year psychological operation where you are being tormented by the media. You get nothing but hate for one person. It's all you ever hear. There's no other stories. There's no other content. There's no other stuff going on. Impeachment hearings, Mueller, all this stuff, and nothing ever happens. So people are dying from this, and they just don't want to hear anything negative anymore. And I've heard people articulate this to me where they say, I want that man out of the White House. But you got to remember, you do not tap out in the middle of a fist fight with a psychopath. You don't just let them beat you up. Mm-mm. You have to fight back. You cannot surrender. And so when this kind of stuff is happening, what's in store for us if it actually is stolen? What's in store for us if all this got overturned? Very, very disruptive, negative things. You and I were talking about this the other night, and we're going to go right on the edge, but we're not going to go too far. When we were do more content on this later if it becomes safe enough, they're going to bundle the VACC, you know what it is, the shot that you're going to get. They want to bundle that with your welfare and with your SNAP benefits and with your Social Security and with your Medicare and Medicaid and SSI.
It's Joe's people saying that.
That's what they're saying. That's what they're saying. That's very, very disturbing because it's already the case in California. If you have a kid, it's mandatory that you give them that. You do not want to take these. You do not want this shot. When we've talked about this in our previous shows, and you actually had that in the boxes of knowledge.
This is chapter 5, box 12.
That's right.
Everything, when I saw it in 1975, it struck by lightning.
You had a near-death experience, for those who don't know, and you came back to tell the tale 25 years ago.
I described a series of events that were probable possibilities of what would occur.
Right.
Okay, and so this one I described the vaccine and to control life and to depopulate, but shut you off from a deeper connection to yourself. I've always struggled, David, with understanding the relationship between you and the divine.
Right.
Okay, to be able to block that it would be the greatest control of a cult or a religion.
Right.
That now begins to make true sense to me what they're up to, because I never bought into the evilness of all of that stuff. I look at the politics, but as I listen and I watch, it becomes so apparent that there is a deeper spiritual control at stake right now today that we have to add to the mix of the soul of America was a stake on the side of Joe's truck. It makes you really stop everybody and realize that I've always said that the battles for the souls of humankind would be fought in healthcare.
And you've heard him say that many times.
And we are there.
And then Joe Biden, let's go over to this camera real quick. Joe Biden's own campaign van, as you told me, now says the battle for the souls of America, which is almost exactly, they don't even have original ideas. They got to steal your ideas.
Well,
that's your IP. You ought to be
and
trying to get some money out of this.
And affordable health care is in the Supreme Court. And the opt-in health care program, where the same thing is being pushed by Kamala.
Yep.
The same thing's being pushed. When you look at the story, these things that I saw from the near-death experience, I never saw them as prophecy, David. I thought it was markers that I had to meet to be able to achieve what I think I'm sent back for.
Right.
But it is amazing that the divine nature of us is not seeing as deep into what is happening as we should be.
Absolutely.
So I just so much appreciate what you're doing, because it's creating that opportunity for even for me, who knows so much of the reality of this, but to see a historical nature that they've been getting away with and perfecting to control and manipulate us.
And for what it's worth, beginning originally in 2009, I had an insider that you can read about in my book, The Ascension Mysteries, called Jacob. And he was working actually with the Roth family directly, so he said, and I believed him because he showed me incontrovertible proof in a variety of ways of that, including pages and pages and pages and pages of bank accounts, all kinds of really weird stuff, blueprints of underground facilities that would have taken millions of dollars to draw, much, much bigger underground facility than anything that is known to exist.
Dumps.
And all the blueprints. And he was showing it to me so fast, it's like, wow, 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 wow. So in the midst of all that, he did say back in 2000, an injectable, ready at that time, that had nanite robots in it, and that once you take this, you begin a transformation into a cyborg. Now, this is what he actually said. This was the agenda. This is what he told me.
Transhumanism, and it's what the head of the World Economic Forum, Klaus, is saying.
I know.
He's quoting that.
And Jacob also told me that would affect the financial system. And he told me this in 2010. It's crazy because what he then says is that once you have this thing, if you resist the control, if you resist the tyranny, at any moment they can give you an electrical shock and bring you to your knees, vomiting, puking, crapping yourself.
Or use 80 gigahertz or higher.
Right.
You know, G5, G6. I mean,
well, we're not going to go into that either. We're not going to. Let's not do that because that's somebody else we know got taken down just for that.
Well,
okay?
I didn't really say that.
No, you didn't. Okay, good enough. We're almost done, and I want to respect the time, so we're just about out of slides here, which is great. I didn't want to have this last more than 3 hours, and we're going to make it. So the data about the security of its V machines, and number 2, expanding corporate control over our most free medium of expression, the internet. Yeah, that's twofold damage is happening right now in a much, much greater extreme. But this was in 2003, folks, 17 years ago. Congressman Kucinich is working to address these problems by providing some of D's internal memos on this site to increase public access, and they were threatening people to take them down and forcing them to take it down, drafting legislation to address software security problems, which never actually made it into law and got used, and working to investigate D's legal abuses. Congressman, it's still going on. This is new. Congressman Kucinich is working with his congressional colleagues to draft legislation that would create an open source design process for voting machine software. Perfect. This process would ensure full public oversight and transparency, as well as to establish the most secure voting software for citizens to cast their votes. Why the hell didn't we do that? Why didn't we do that? Why didn't we make open source voting software that everybody can look at it, everybody can audit it? Maybe we use blockchain. Every vote has a unique digital signature.
Yeah, sure.
You cannot duplicate it. Everybody can audit it for themselves. You could count the entire vote thing at home on the blockchain. Nobody could ever rip it off. Nobody could ever steal again.
Well, I can tell you why we didn't do it. Because people did his Kucinich now. I know he's retired and all of that, but this is his time to bring this stuff forward to the presidency. And if he's not doing it, I'm thankful that you're doing it.
Well, thank you, Danny.
Come on, look. People need this stuff, David, and they need to be able to trust the process by which you come to the conclusion.
Let me also say this. We'll go back here again. If you are still worried about this thing, if lockdowns continued through 2021, 22, 23, like they were saying, the woman who said this at the beginning of the second debate, oh yeah, we're anticipating lockdowns 2021, 2022, right at the beginning. Even if that's true, okay, all that you'd have to do is create a blockchain method where once you go online, certify your identity through a government-approved portal, now you have a unique digital signature, you could vote at home on your phone. But you have your blockchain signature, it becomes easier to vote, but more difficult in terms of the voter registration, you port that over. But the point is, if you actually did it with blockchain, every American citizen is counted. Every American citizen only has one vote. And you can screw with software if it's not done right, but if you use this kind of technology, it's totally foolproof, or it should be totally foolproof, because everybody can audit the blockchain.
consistently.
So thank you for saying that, Danny. I appreciate that.
Oh, but come on, you're creating an opportunity for people to get real.
So last few slides here. Under the DMCA, Digital Millennium Copyright Act, ISPs, Internet Service Providers, can be asked to remove inappropriately posted copywritten material. But D, among others, this is still Kucinich, has abused this provision in order to stifle free speech.
They've gotten really good at it, too.
Oh, yeah. Now they're really good at it. For example, they've sent cease and desist letters demanding the removal of mere hyperlinks to these incriminating memos. But no court has ever ruled that hyperlinks to documents on other sites would actually violate copyright law. Also, D sent similar letters to Swarthmore College. They're shaking down a little university. Come on, that's so sad. Investigate these abuses. And here is the letter where he did that. Okay, they link to it in the document, and it says right there, November 21st, 2003, I write to you regarding a growing list of abuses under the DMCA Act, notice, and takedown procedures that marginalize the fair use doctrine and seek to expand copyright beyond the scope that Congress and the judicial branch have established. The most recent and aggressive examples concern a subject at the core of our democracy, electronic V machines. It is my hope that the dual importance of both jurisdictional issues, election reform, and the DMCA will merit an investigation by the Judiciary Committee. And of course, nothing ever happened. Now, this is another really interesting thing. I dug out some links from the memory hole, going to old stuff on rents.com, finding those links that worked then and now they don't, and then digging them out of archive.org. That's what I did, folks, to get these links. So this is how it was heating up in November 2003. California actually banned this company based upon the evidence. So check this out. This is Wired News. California halts e-vote certification. November 3rd, it says uncertified software may have been installed on electronic voting machines used in one California county, according to the Secretary of State's office in California. This is a big deal. They changed the software, like Kucinich said. Mark Carell, Assistant Secretary of State for Policy and Planning, told attendees Thursday at a panel on V systems that California was halting the certification process for any new voting machines manufactured by D. The reason, Carell said, was that his office had recently received, quote-unquote, disconcerting information, probably from Kucinich, that D may have installed uncertified software on its touchscreen machines used in one county. He did not say which county was involved. However, Secretary of State spokesperson Douglas Stone later told Wired News that the county in question is Alameda. So there you go. California blocked them because of this stealing in place. And then D itself, this link is still active today. You can go look it up. It's still there. Backs off of their legal challenges. So right here, you can read that. It's still out there. They finally stopped harassing universities and individuals and giving them legal threats if they linked to these memos that are incriminating that Kucinich linked to. They actually backed off from political pressure. But then, just days later, less than 2 weeks later, they tried to steal from Maryland. Look at this. This is another one I had to dig out of the memory hole. Email stolen from D is a call to gouge Maryland. Annapolis, December 15, 2003. An email found in a collection of files stolen from D, their internal database, recommends charging Maryland out the yin-yang if the state requires D to add paper printouts to the $73 million voting system they purchased. $73 million.
And they didn't want to give them a paper copy.
A paper copy. The email from Ken, dated January 3rd, 2003, discusses a Baltimore Sun article about a University of Maryland study of the D system. Quote, there is an important point that seems to be missed by all these articles. They already bought the system. At this point, they are just closing the barn door. Let's just hope that as a company, we are smart enough to charge out the yin if they try to change the rules now and legislate voter receipts. Ken later... Isn't that crazy?
But
Ken later clarifies that he meant out the yin-yang, adding any after-sale changes should be prohibitively expensive. The email has been cited by advocates of voter-verified receipts who say estimates of the cost of adding printers, as much as $20 million statewide, have been bloated, to say the least. So there you go. I mean, and then there's one more. Wait, there's more. And I dug this one out of the memory hole. D hires convicted felons as their election supervisor, people. Isn't that fun? Here it is, Mercury News, local news. I'm going to zoom in on the middle now, okay? So you can see it clearly. Critics say convicted felons worked for EV companies. Oh my God, December 17th. San Francisco, a manufacturer of EV machines, has employed at least 5 convicted felons as managers. Well, right, because you want somebody who's going to go along with what you're doing.
Strong arm, too.
According to critics demanding more stringent background checks for people responsible for V software. Voter advocate Bev Harris, that's blackboxvoting.com, you're going to see her in a minute. She was the one that was doing all this stuff back in the day. Voter advocate Bev Harris alleged Tuesday that managers of a subsidiary of D, one of the country's largest voting equipment vendors, included a cocaine trafficker, a man who conducted fraudulent stock transactions, and a programmer jailed for falsifying computer records. The programmer, Jeffrey Dean, wrote and maintained proprietary code used to count hundreds of thousands of votes. As senior vice president of Global Election Systems Incorporated, D purchased GES in January 2002. So he was the senior vice president, and he was a programmer who was jailed for falsifying computer records. And then he was the one who wrote the code to count hundreds of thousands of votes. And oops, one more thing. According to a public court document released before this company hired him, Dean served time in a Washington correctional facility for stealing money and tampering with computer files in a scheme that involved a high degree of sophistication and planning.
Hackers.
So once again, remember now we've got Peter Beater, who is got this guy who comes up to him and cries.
Apologize.
And says, I'm so sorry that I was part of the Lever Brothers. And we go around flipping all the levers, make sure whoever needs to lose is going to lose. Why did you do it? I did it for the money. And Peter forgives him and says, I understand what it's like to be that poor. I don't blame you. You are forgiven. And the testimony in the late 1960s, early 1970s, where they showed you how they did it in court. Why wouldn't you hire convicted felons to be the people doing this? Of course you would, right? They're going to take the money. You're going to expunge their record, get them off of everything else they might do, or kill them if they don't.
And it's the same organization. Who is the president in 2003?
It was Bush. That's right. So here's Bev Harris, blackboxvoting.com, going back to the slide. Here she is on CNBC, and here she is on CNN with Lou Dobbs. And so, Lou, I really recommend you talk to Bev again. Mm-hmm. Bring her up again. It was blackboxvoting.com. You can go online and look at it in the archive Wayback Machine, which I highly recommend doing, because all of these hidden secrets are now being exposed. And my belief, and I know, Dannion, this is your belief as well, the universe must have karma be delivered.
Agreed.
There has to be, folks, there has to be a sequence of events that takes place that exposes this. And I was very upset and concerned when I woke up after the election and saw that this had happened, as I'm sure many people were. You said 71 million people voted for the current president. And that undoubtedly is real. That they did not tamper. They didn't use any of this stuff. They didn't need to, because it was a landslide if this hadn't have been done. It's the same people. They changed the names. They changed the software a little bit. But it's the same freaking plan.
And that's what's so important. The conspiracy to maneuver us into the areas that they're maneuvering us.
Back to him.
The conspiracy to maneuver us is become so obvious when you just use one letter, the D, and it's the same people.
I know.
It's the same control. It's the same business, and it's offshore, and it's being controlled and manipulated in foreign countries. When you look at how the system is operating, but like you said, there is a deeper, more sinister event to this, and more sinister that we better look at from a religious and a spiritual point of view,
right,
as much as we're looking at it from the deception and manipulation of our Constitution and us and American freedoms.
Let me say this again, back over to here. Even if you absolutely cannot stand the current person in office, okay, this is so crazy this has been going on for so long, since the dawn of electronic machines or mechanical devices for voting, okay?
Since slot machines.
I think we've proven a very, very compelling case here, because what we've got is we got Rockefeller finding out that there was a better machine to steal with, and then he bought it. He bought the company for $20 a share when it was only worth like $4 or $5. He takes the machines, they dump all the old machines in New York State. As soon as New York State got machine voting, that's when Rockefeller goes in. He's in there for
14 years.
14 years, and he buys the company that's going to do the best job. Then you have the Louisiana court case, as explained by Peter, where they actually had people in court demonstrating how this was done. Peter himself runs for governor of West Virginia. His votes get stolen from him unless he was willing to pay $250,000, which he wasn't. Not one mechanical vote went for him because the machine was rigged to make his votes go for the other guy. Okay? So we talked about that whole thing, that this plan was very well orchestrated, that they knew about it all the way back then. They were doing this back then. Then we fast forwarded ahead to Sherman Skolnick to the year 2000, in which the exact same thing happens. The most bizarre, of course, again, to remind you that Skolnick said on Halloween night in October that that he had profound sources, high-level sources, that told him there was going to be a constitutional election crisis. And he had it almost a week before it actually, 4 days, whatever it was, before it actually happened. That blew me away. And then he said, yeah, they're doing it because they want to try to steer Rockefeller in office. That didn't happen. But that
They were trying to do that.
They were trying to do that.
I was alive then. I was there. I mean, I was trying to put that back together in my mind, David, because I couldn't figure out why Rockefeller was being played so importantly in the Senate. But now it makes sense to me. But I do not know how, if they had to have a tiebreaker and it became an insurrection between the two, then that was the put Gore out and put Rockefeller in to keep the same consortium in place as the Bush dynasty positioned itself.
Yeah. I mean, the Bushes basically outsmarted the Rockefellers, in my opinion. And the Rockefellers were not tactical enough to have figured out how this could be done. But what we see over and over again, it is so ludicrous to think that these elections get that close, that it's this tiny, tiny, tiny little thing. What they're doing is they're topping it off. It's like you top off your gas tank. Get the last little bit. I want to get to $25 exactly. Now it's $75, right? Mm-hmm. 75. Top it off. So they just top off the votes. They just get just enough. And they duplicated the 1876 script. It's the same state. It happens in Florida. It's the same dispute where one guy wins the popular vote and one guy wins the electoral vote. And then they republished the book on February 15th, 2000, just to give you the big middle finger and say, yep, this is what we're going to do, folks.
Look at 1984. Look at Animal Farm. Look at Atlas Shrugs. But when you said that, David, it made me go back and look at books that they would have to tell us. They would have to tell us what they were going to do. And our mind runs through all these books that literally lay out where we are and what we're doing and how long ago they had laid these books out to tell us. They've gotten really good at this.
And so not only do we have Skolnick talking about this intel, we also have Kucinich talking about it in 2003, just a couple of years later, basically confirming everything Skolnick was saying on the House.gov website, the official congressional website. Says, yeah, this voting system is terrible. They can go in, they can read what the votes are, they can change them, they can erase the records. We got witnesses. And then you find out, yeah, guess what? They're trying to shake down the state of Maryland. California says we don't want these machines. You changed the software on us, unauthorized. And then also, it goes on and on and on, folks. This congressional rematch, where it's down to just a few votes and they're counting chads, it's ridiculous. It was all a scam. It was just a fight between two wealthy and powerful entities that had slightly different agendas. But the one thing they always agree on, and I'm sure you'll agree with me on this, even if they fight to the death with each other, both sides absolutely must keep the secrecy of what they're up to. They will never reveal the secrecy, but they will fight to the death. That has all changed since 2016. In our opinion, my opinion, your opinion, many other people's opinion, you have
71 million.
Well, yeah. there's this letter of the alphabet that we've talked about a bunch of times, and now you can't even talk about it at all. But they just said recently, nothing can stop what is coming is actually NCSWIC, which is the national whatever, I forget the name, but it's basically an election certification organization, and that's under CISA. And just this week, they fired CISA, which is supposed to be overseeing how elections work. And they said, nothing can stop what is coming is not just an acronym. So there's something big vectoring in, and I will give you guys a little bit of a briefing. I can't say too much right now, but I will tell you that the people in the alliance are literally doing jumping jacks with excitement over the seizure of this server from Germany. They say it is much, much bigger than we realize. This thing has got legs like you can't imagine, and the cabal should be very, very, very concerned. Therefore, in all seriousness, and I'm going to say this to you with absolute seriousness right now, I believe that what we are about to head into, folks, is the most dangerous moment in American history that we've ever had. The capacity for these people to try to do something else, to try to steer it back, is practically limitless. So I do recommend that you just have simple provisions. You have some rice, you have some beans, you have several 5-gallon jugs of stored water, because we have been getting over and over again that you might not be able to leave the house. Serious crazy stuff could start to happen, and you might not be able to leave the house for as long as 4 to 6 months. Okay? And that has been leaked, so I'm not the first one to say that. I'm not getting in trouble saying that, okay? But this whole thing could go from being something that we're talking about to something that becomes very, very kinetic. Something that could even involve another big country, the main rival, siding with the DS and big tech. That rival could actually begin doing actual kinetic warfare. This could all happen. So please, I don't want to put any fear porn into the show. And that's why we're going to end again with a small meditation, try to keep it to around 3 hours.
Yeah, people need to stay really calm.
But I don't want you to panic, but I do want you to be prepared.
I agree.
Because anything can happen. Power grid could go down, wars could start, 7 different cities that have mass stuff going on at the same time. I'm not even going to say the second word. You know what mass means. Mass S's. Anything. I mean, we don't even know what they got. What is their last card that they could play? There could be something. The Alliance is trying to prepare for all this. But folks, please, even if you don't believe me, just have some stuff on hand. Because we don't really know. And depending on
the intelligence people, what they're saying, I see utter terror. I listen to what they're saying, and the thing that got me this afternoon was Barack. Mm-hmm. When Barack said to keep one bit of shred of dignity, you need to concede right now, President Trump.
It's ridiculous.
This is an ex-president. This is an ex-president who knows the law.
Mm-hmm.
Who knows the law, and he knows what December the 8th is. That is the deciding point of what happens. He knows this. Okay, and for him to come on and say that only shows me utter terror, David.
Yep.
And you look at Brennan.
Or Brennan when he said...
I thought he was going to cry. I thought he was going to cry on national television. I'm sorry, but I thought he was going to cry.
The president must be removed right now.
Yeah, I mean...
even before the election results are done.
I mean...
just get rid of him.
He's got to, because we're going to get caught and joke and bury it.
Oh, my God.
It's amazing... It's amazing for we to find ourselves where we are. But you know what? I have this faith in the divine nature of righteousness, and that there are forces that like you said, the karma of what we've lived with, I think, since 1871 is now, and now the voting machine story, it's so obvious that this is a time to cleanse our country.
The karma must be paid back. These people must be held accountable. And I am so grateful that, like, in a kind of a meta-analysis way, that all of these different things are coming out at the same time.
Everything's happening all at once.
The Luciferian stuff, the voting now, that we've gone through the whole history of that. The symbolism has become so obvious. They've done it so many times in Super Bowl halftime shows, Grammy Awards, Olympic opening and closing ceremonies, and all these movies, all these music videos. And you hear this crappy music playing in the restaurant. You go back and you watch the video, and it's crazy satanic. And over again, I've done this. And then you got this girl who, let's talk again real quick, as I've done in many, many other videos. about the Grammys in this year 2020. And you got the girl who sweeps the entire award ceremony, and it was totally rigged. The woman who was running the thing
Everybody said
resigned, right?
Everybody said that.
And she wins like something like 19 Grammys. It was even more than Christopher Cross for an actually really good album that he won, but and then when she comes out, she's got the mask on. She's got the mask on that nobody knew about at that point. Nobody thought we'd have to wear these. She comes out with the mask on. She wins all these Grammys, and you go back and look at her videos, and she's got black eyes and big bat wings and black stuff hanging off of her. They're very, very disturbing. So
it just shows that all the celebrities are attacking the present administration. Everybody who can put pressure on this is the way it works, a certain way. It has worked this way since the inception of the Constitution. And the day that is decided has been written history historically. So we'll see. Right there is what everybody needs to prepare for with what you're saying.
Yep.
Don't be dumb enough to get caught with your hands in your pockets. Do not. You never know. In this frenetic nature about how the internet works, what you can do, what we're seeing on the surface could be nothing like what's really happening if you listen to Snowden and you listen to Assange.
And I would just say that, the most important things would be like rice, beans, canned sardines, canned tuna, canned soup, water, get your toilet paper, get your Kleenex tissue, whatever else kind of stuff you want, because there could be disruptions in the supply of goods and services. There could be
anything.
We have no idea. I mean, they are going down, and they know it. And that's why all the headlines on Drudge and everything, they're not even talking about Joe anymore. They're only talking about the CV thing, the thing that's spreading, right? And they keep saying, oh, there's so many cases, and now we got to do this again. Now we got to do this again. Folks, you can believe what you want, but the evidence doesn't look good. It doesn't look good. Now, I don't advocate violence at all, and I never have. And we never would do that here. All I'm saying is, when the POTUS lost, did any of his people do anything? Not a thing. Okay, you got to remember that, because what they're also going to try to do is blame all of it on his people. They're going to say it's all because of the letter of the alphabet, and it's all because they support this guy. No, that's not what it is. And you got to be smart enough to think through this. So we are going to get our freedom. My dreams are very confident about this. And this is what needs to happen. It's a spiritual imprimatur. It must be moved forward.
I agree.
And I believe ultimately the reason for this is that we live in a spiritual universe. And so you asked me to throw this one in, so we're going to do it. Back to the slides. The DNA experiments that we already have prove that we are part of a living, conscious universe. The universe is alive.
Remember this, everybody.
And this is Dr. Luc Montagnier, who incidentally, being, the guy who actually invented, he actually was the one to sequence HIV. That's what he got his Nobel Prize for. A Nobel Prize winning scientist, Nobel Prize for sequencing HIV. And when he looked at the new one, he said it's definitely artificial. And that all came out in that movie with Dr. Judy that was massively, massively censored. Okay, so he confirmed that it's built off of the HIV. I know that. I know what HIV looks like. Okay.
And still all the same players, the same way. When you go back 20 years, it's the same players. It's not anybody new,
That's right.
everybody.
They make these things and they do these things. So one of his most fascinating experiments, the one that I love the most, is seen here. And this is where, on the left, you see where there's a test tube there. That's what they are. And then it's inside a can, and the test tubes have a wire wrapped around them. It says generator 7 hertz at the top. That's electrostatic current that's in the Schumann resonance, the basic electromagnetic frequency of Earth, right?
7.2 hertz.
So you just zap it with Earth's frequency. On the left-hand side, you've got a test tube that has trace amounts of DNA in it. And then on the right side, you have empty tubes with nothing in it but distilled water. And yet you sit there and you cook it for 18 hours with 7 hertz of energy, just like the Earth does, and the water develops spontaneous DNA.
That is what is the greatest thing, David. that divine nature can keep recreating life. No matter what they try to control, no matter what they try to manipulate, what we have to sit comfortably with is there is a divine force that will create life and to generate life. There is a divine force greater than all this BS that men are creating that's in operating, and it's so reinforced all the way down to this virus, so reinforced by this piece of information.
That's right. So we got one more slide here, which is just to show some of the things of how this works. So they have different methods how they study these things. So transduction, transferring molecular information into water using an electromagnetic field. They don't know how this works, but that's what they're calling it, right?
Yeah.
So you can see signal generator, DNA, and aqueous solution with no DNA in it. You zap it for 18 hours and you get DNA, right? So then number 2, PCR. It says usually PCR, it's just a type of, it's called polymerase chain reaction. PCR tests require the presence of DNA to be copied, but in these experiments, it's assumed that the DNA may work as that the transduction solution may work as a DNA template itself, because you have no DNA in it, but then you test for DNA. So they call this gel electrophoresis, number 3, separating DNA fragments created through PCR by size and comparing them to the DNA used at the first stage. This test shows whether the DNA of your desired size was created, but again, they did this with no DNA already there.
So it's not
the gel electrophoresis test shows DNA when there's not supposed.
So it's not replicated artificially.
That's right.
It is new generation of life. See, when you look at how they replicate RNA, use RNA to replicate a certain genetic system or strain, okay? What this is saying is this is new. This is life coming no matter what you try to do. There is a life-giving force that's coming always. And that reinforces in all of us that from a religious and spiritual belief system, that simple experiment proves to us that there is the karmic revelation, that
Right.
force will show itself, and it's doing it now.
The basic laws of quantum physics itself have life built into them. Water creates life with no outside input. It just happens. So life is a quantum blueprint, a quantum signature, and because you are intelligent and you would ultimately be made by DNA, your DNA must also be capable of electromagnetic transduction, which means your entire consciousness that makes your brain, which is what we think DNA is doing, exists outside of the DNA molecule.
I agree.
And that is proven when people like Dannion have their near-death experience, and we have these many studies that have shown everybody who has an NDE has the same basic, depending on who you talk to, 10 or 11 stages to the experience.
Mm-hmm.
And so tell us a little bit about the reality that all these different near-death experiences are seeing, and how that, just a brief summary of what they see when you go into the afterlife.
Well, you see a separation of dimension. You release from your body. No one ever really dies. The whole concept of death, the thing that's driving all of this, David, is the fear of death, or the fear of you killing somebody.
Right.
Which is the ultimate trap, because death only has religious parameters until the near-death experience came into the game. Once the near-death experience came into the game, a whole nother viewpoint of reality has to be controlled and manipulated, but so diverse because of cardiopulmonary resuscitation that you can't escape. You can't get away from the fact that people see there's a life after this one. I think that a part of what is so important about now is to lose that fear and take on the strength of what's right to defend our rights and what made us a great nation, and to keep us from becoming like a controlled bunch of transhuman beings. Right? The goal is to make us bionically, electronically, and emotionally connected to the system of what the new agenda is.
And then you're born a slave and you die a slave, and there's no hope of any other thing happening.
That's it. And you do exactly what you're told, and they can get rid of you at the time that you choose. But watch. The probably 25 to 50 million people who've had this experience come back and say there is a series of that you go through, a life review, and everybody doesn't come from the same place, and how you make that transition is, mine was tunnels and then meadows, or something that shows that there is a barrier between you and that place, but it's a sense of relief. There's that whole hellish story.
What about hell?
Yeah, I remember I told that story.
Yeah.
I had a lady say, well, Dannion, you never mentioned where you talk about hell. I said, well, like we said in the program, I said, look, they didn't bring it up, and I damn sure didn't bring it up. So anybody wants to know about hell, the first thing they need to do is, as soon as they get down the tunnel and they meet that being of light that meets you, the first thing you say is, where's hell? Where's hell? I'm sure somebody will help you, but I was not going to bring it up if they wouldn't bring it up, because I can promise you, if anybody should have gone to hell, it's me, everybody. If I didn't go, you don't even have a chance at going to hell. So once you start eliminating, David, those fear-based life events, that fear of death, to eliminate, the spiritual being knows they cannot die. And if you don't pull from your spiritual self as you look at this control propaganda that we're dealing with and living in right now, we're going to miss what we're supposed to truly see. I've learned this through these programs with you and getting around and watching how much work you put to bring this forward. We have to go deeper. It's something bigger than politics. It's something bigger than who we like or don't like. It's a deeper spiritual event that's occurring that we better pay attention to. And the thing I think is most important is you were telling people to prepare. Hey, everybody, you better stop and start taking care of yourself. You better look at the patterns and the habits that you have, and knowing that the world's going to change. Whether you like it or not, it's changing now before our very eyes. What we can control about ourselves and what we can control about our health care, that's what we better be doing. So I'm asking you, stay calm, but start taking better care of yourself and start paying attention to the deeper spiritual implications of what you see.
Well, let's do that. I want to keep it to about 3 hours, and we're a little bit over now, but we're going to cut it off quick. So we'll do a short global meditation, because this is the secret. This is the ascension process. That's my last slide. We actually made it through all my slides. All right, so here we go, folks. I'd like you to take a nice deep breath and place both feet flat on the floor. I'll do it too. This is just going to be a short one. So let's really go for it, because we're not going to go 20 minutes. It's only going to be like 5. As you breathe more and more deeply, you notice yourself becoming ever increasingly relaxed. Feeling a light, fluffy, wonderful vibrational energy moving through your body. Relaxing any areas that might have tension, as if a warm, liquid, living light is coursing through you so gently now. Relaxing and melting away all the tension in every part of your body. So if there's any part of your body where you still feel tension, just let it all go. Breathe it out. Becoming so much more relaxed, so much more deeply in tune with the true core of your being. Following the path of your breathing down the winding way through the forest of the mind, going deeper and deeper into the true core of relaxation, of bliss. That natural inspiration that flows almost like a romantic energy that just comes to you effortlessly as you breathe more and more. Feeling so perfectly comfortable in your body, perfectly comfortable in your chair or on the floor, wherever you may be. Relaxing so deeply. Going even more into pure awareness. The awareness that the universe itself is made of. The only thing that really exists. The consciousness that is in quantum physics itself. Making beautiful crystals in the water. According to Dr. Masaru Emoto, making DNA appear in test tubes of distilled water. According to Dr. Luc Montagnier. Romance that same energy that could change your DNA. Romance that energy right now. Breathe it in. Ingest light. Ingest peace. ingest total relaxation. And you become even more and more deeply relaxed. As you envision this world being healed, envision a true and fair electoral system where each vote is accurately and legally counted, where all of these abuses of the past are erased away with open source technology available to all that cannot be manipulated. Open source. Everyone can look. Everyone can audit for themselves, do their own recount. And there's no question about the validity of the results. Bringing forth Congressman Dennis Kucinich's dream, getting that act actually passed, getting true voice of the people represented in free, fair, honest elections. And on a much greater level, we co-create a peaceful planet, a planet of love, a planet of light, a planet of hope, a planet of freedom, a planet in which everyone has a voice. Everyone's voice deserves to be heard. Corruption has been exposed and rooted out, even at the most massive levels. International conspiracies dissolved. Corporate cover-ups exposed. Frauds eliminated. Truth revealed. Feel the confidence, feel the power, feel the love that is coming in as indictments are unsealed, as true criminality is revealed. As the scope of what there is to know begins to unfold and carry us through a comprehensive restructuring of planet Earth itself, revealing hidden technologies, anti-gravity, free energy, faster than light travel, amazing medical devices that are technological in nature and can nearly eliminate sickness and ill health. Solving the world's problems, cleaning up our garbage, making this planet a true paradise, a peaceful, blissful, higher dimensional, ascended reality. Gaining access to forbidden technology, exploring the universe, and meeting our long-lost brothers and sisters. Those who have gone before, those who have always been here, the ancient extraterrestrials, who built the stone monuments of such massive size, blocks of stone impossible to lift with any conventional crane, and yet they were effortlessly put together. What if these people exist outside of time? What if time travel is one of the basic technologies they have and were using when they built those pyramids? Did they already know what was going to happen now? Did they already know that the exposure of negativity would be worldwide and incontrovertible? Did they already know that this would be a springboard to the so-called Golden Age? In the now, we breathe in and we co-create that Golden Age, that ascension, that transformed planet, that transformed, loving, peaceful, corruption-free reality. It is yours if you but stretch forth your hand and accept it for what it is. And so it is. We certify that this is the voting that matters. This is the election. We vote with our prayers and our meditations. And we know that we are heard. We know that these higher beings must listen to us. And we hereby humbly ask the higher forces, whatever we think of as the Creator and its emissaries, we humbly beseech you here and now, please help us. Please help us create peace in this transition. Please minimize the damage, and please maximize the truth and the exposure. We humbly ask you, we pray to you, please let us have a peaceful planet. Let us be seen and heard and not be suppressed with these electronic methods and these illegal campaigns that take our voice and rob it from us. We certify and ensure a future that is free of sickness and disease, a future that is free of legerdemain, conspiracies, lying, cheating, stealing, a future in which we have enough money, enough prosperity, in which everyone has enough that they need, and we all live like a millionaire. We certify this, we say this in prayer, and we say it with the combined strength of our numbers, live and in real time. We hereby decree it is so, it is done, it is accomplished, and so it is. And now, come on back to the room. I guess that was longer than 5 minutes. I apologize, but
It's still good.
had to hit it out of the park. David Wilcock, Dannion Brinkley, 2 meat suits here. No secret handshakes going on there. That is totally legit, folks. We will see you next time, dropping bombs of knowledge to bring you the truth that nobody else dares talk about.
Stay steady, everybody. Stay steady.
It says the stream is finished.
All right, we did it.
All right. And it was great. So, Dabo is the same as the
Basically.
Yeah, I mean, that was the perfect way
Isn't
to
that
do it.
amazing?
It was the perfect way to do it, though, David. By using D, people are going to catch on. I was going to try to say it, but I couldn't find a way to say it,
Right.
without messing up Dabo.
Well, and what does dominion mean? It means you control everything.
Yeah.
So they gotta tell you what they're doing,
Dominion over the
But I don't think anybody expected me to have all this data. I mean,
No,
this is a great.
I'm going to give it. I was giving it to you.
That's why I was in a panic trying to get it all done. I'm sorry about the way I reacted when
You
it came
didn't-
in, but I was right at the end.
David, I don't even notice any of that.
Yeah.
I watch. Look, when
All
I
right,
get
it's
to
Tahoe
see
time.
when I get to see the end product, I don't care if you yelling and breaking shit.
I don't care what you do,
Yeah, I don't make
David.
no difference. You bringing home the bacon now, son. And Ellis, thank
As
you.
long as you buy them shrimps.
Yeah, thank you for being magnificent, Ellis.
Ellis, you did a wonderful job.
For me.
I'm sure you were smacking
was
down haters left and
multitasking.
right.
Oh yeah, I was.
Oh no,
I
I
was
don't.
doing all of it. So that's
I
why
did
I was
all of
monitoring
it.
tally lights to make sure we
I
were
know,
on the right
because
camera.
I was.
Because you were very preoccupied there.
Well,
Obviously, there was some big
you know
assholes.
how I am. I like to clean things up. You can edit in studio and edit out immediately right now whatever talking we did at the beginning
Okay.
when we didn't know. So you might as well do it since the button's right up there.
You want to finish closing it?
Yeah.
Wow, we made money too. People donated.
Yeah, like $500. One guy donated like $200. You were talking about something. I can't remember exactly what it was, and he donated $200.
Wow.
Now, are these off, or do I have to turn them off? I tried to thank him, but I don't know how.
See, when you look at the history of American politics, it's not possible.
Right.
Or else all of the history of America is skewed and wrong because every politician looks at Florida. And Florida gives you the demographics of. See, when you look at the history of American politics, it's not possible.
Right.
Or else all of the history of America is
It
skewed
doesn't
and
start at the
wrong
beginning.
because every
Does it?
politician looks at Florida. And Florida gives you the demographics of what's going to
That's
roll
where it
across
starts.
the country. It's the electoral college is important, but Florida's the
No, I
most
can't do it
important.
right now.
When you saw Florida, then you knew.
Well,
We'll make it work later.
yeah.